Chapter 1528. What's there to say? Jiang Pingji passed by in her military uniform. Her sharp ears overheard their conversation, so she interrupted and asked. Bai Ning laughed. Feng Jing is preparing to marry a beautiful lady. He'll be hosting a banquet. He wants me to go and drink until I'm drunk. Jiang Pingji glanced at Qin Gong. He had a bright and warm smile on his face. She could tell that he was in a good mood. Don't say things like, I'm going to get married after the war, wife and children will warm the Kong bed. Jiang Pingji also learned about the certain death flag from the audience. It was common in dramas and movies. The main character who spoke would definitely die. The purpose was to set off the tragic atmosphere. Even though Jiang Pingji herself had raised countless flags, it was indeed inauspicious to say such things before the war. Qin Gong asked in surprise, there's a saying for this? Jiang Pingji said, I don't know where I heard it, but those who said such things before the war basically never came back. Qin Gong's face turned pale. Bai Ning patted his shoulder and said in a rough voice, don't be afraid. Just spit a few times and take it back. It was originally a joke, but he didn't expect that Qin Gong would actually learn to do it seriously. He looked very cute. Jiang Pingji could not help but be speechless. I lied to you. You two actually believed it? Qin Gong opened his innocent eyes wide. Seeing that Jiang Pingji could not continue doing evil, she asked, do you really plan to marry Lady Su after the war? Qin Gong nodded. He was immediately stunned. He asked her, how did you know it was her, my lord? Jiang Pingji asked in return, if it wasn't for this intention, you wouldn't have to take care of everything even if she's the daughter of your former lord, right? That's what I think. Qin Gong said, after the war I'll marry her. I can take care of her in the future. It's killing two birds with one stone. Even though Jiang Pingji did not mistreat the children of defeated vassals, she could not stand the tripping of her subordinates. Since the successive defeats of Su Fei and Su Pei, the Su family, which used to be like the sun in the sky, had completely quietened down. If Su Fei and his wife were still alive as the daughter of a vassal, Su Yanxiao's marriage would definitely be top-notch. Now that Su Yanxiao's parents were dead and her immediate family was no longer around, Su Yanxiao's marriage fell into the hands of her eldest aunt. Eldest aunt didn't treat Su Yanxiao harshly, but she wasn't as attentive and loving as her mother. Marriage was even more out of the question. Most of the time, she would be married to the legitimate son of a small aristocratic family. If she was unlucky, she might even be married to a commoner who had recently risen to power. Once she got married, Qin Gong would have to avoid arousing suspicion and would not be able to protect her. Rather than worrying like this, it would be better to just marry her. He would treat her like a treasure. Qin Gong was Jiang Pingji's trusted general. If Su Yanxiao married him, no one would dare to underestimate her in the future. Jiang Pingji smiled. I'm so envious. Qin Gong was puzzled. Is my lord envious of this general? Jiang Pingji said, it's good to be young. Isn't it enviable? Qin Gong was confused. He didn't know what was so enviable about being young. This had nothing to do with what his lord had said before. But he could also tell that his lord was very much in favor of his marriage with Su Yanxiao. This made Qin Gong heave a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid of anything else, but he was afraid that his lord wouldn't agree. If that happened, Qin Gong would be in a difficult position. He could either give up on Su Yanxiao or resign and live in seclusion. If he asked himself honestly, the possibility of him choosing the latter was higher. Remember to leave a cup of wedding wine for me. Qin Gong smiled. Yes, my lord. While they were chatting, the army was ready to set off. Jiang Pingji mounted her horse. My lord, what are you doing? Qin Gong was shocked. Was his lord going too? It's not good to be idle all the time. My bones are getting hard, Jiang Pingji said. Let's set off. Qin Gong was speechless. Was it really because of this willful reason? Qin Gong missed his old lord Su Fei very much. Although Su Fei wasn't very smart, he wouldn't be so bold as to rush to the front lines. The army set off in three directions. Jiang Pingji's expression was not very good. Her brows were tightly knitted. She led the army and set off naturally, not because she wanted to fight a war. She just had a bad premonition. This was a kind of natural intuition that had been honed through countless life and death experiences. It was hard to explain, but this intuition had saved her many times. The army quietly approached the enemy's camp. The scouts who set off first quickly returned with news. Reporting to my lord, the enemy's camp is empty. The shadows in the tents are all straw branches. Judging from the ashes of the bonfire in the camp, they should have left less than 15 minutes ago. They split into three directions to outflank the enemy's camp. But they didn't expect the enemy to have already retreated. Qin Gong and Bai Ning each led a group of troops. When they heard the scouts' report, they immediately gave the order to chase after them. The enemy left in a hurry. They left some heavy and clumsy military supplies and rations in the camp that were not suitable to be taken away. It could be seen that the enemy left in a hurry. If they caught up with the enemy at this time, they would definitely win a great victory when the enemy was unprepared. Jiang Pingji felt that something was wrong. Her troops did not move. She asked the scout, "How's the bonfire?" The scout said, "Some are still burning, some have been extinguished. It's a mess." Jiang Pingji asked again, "What about the footprints near the bonfire?" The scout recalled carefully and reported truthfully. The footprints near the bonfire were a little messy. Jiang Pingji asked a few more questions in succession, such as the layout of the enemy's camp. The more she listened, the more she frowned. The general who was sent by the military counselors to protect his lord was puzzled. He asked, "My lord, is there something wrong?" Jiang Pingji grabbed the reins and said coldly, "There are many things wrong." They had the energy to prepare straw branches to disguise as human shadows. It can be seen that they were quite calm when they retreated. If that's the case, the bonfire, documents and objects shouldn't be so messy. The general's heart turned cold after he heard that. He exclaimed, "Could it be a trap?" Jiang Pingji sneered. "I'm afraid we've been fooled. Send 2 groups of troops to recall Qin Gong and the others. I'm afraid there's an ambush ahead." The general asked, "Don't we need to send troops to support them?" Jiang Pingji smiled. "We should also welcome our guests. Let's deal with the enemy first. Give the order, get into formation and face the enemy." Not long after Jiang Pingji finished speaking, the enemy's battle cries suddenly rang out in the previously empty enemy's camp. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Arrows rained down from the sky. The enemy's sneak attack was astonishingly fast. Many people were hit before they could react. "They're hiding underground." Jiang Pingji revealed how the enemy appeared out of thin air in one sentence. It wasn't that there was no one in the camp. They were all hiding underground. Because the camp was very messy, it was impossible for the soldiers to move the items and check them one by one. As long as the soldiers spread out their sleeping mats and covered the holes where they were hiding, they would basically not be discovered. Chapter 1529. What are you waiting for? Let's go back. Jiang Pingji pulled out her god-slaying sword. Her eyes were fierce. The deputy general said, "Yes, sir." Jiang Pingji wanted to rush out and kill to her heart's content, but she still needed to command the army to defend against the enemy's sneak attack and seize the opportunity to counterattack. The enemy seized the initiative. As soon as they arrived, they rained arrows and disrupted the army's formation. Under such circumstances, if there was no chief commander to command and dispatch, the casualties would be terrible when the enemy rushed in. Jiang Pingji was reckless, but she never delayed important matters. "I wonder how Feng Jing and the others are doing." These troops were indeed elites who had been trained for many years. Jiang Pingji often arranged military exercises and rehearsed all kinds of unexpected situations. Therefore, even though the enemy seized the initiative this time, they reacted after the first wave of arrows. They shrank their formation and adopted a defensive formation. This was the method of minimizing losses. At the same time, it could reflect the true combat quality of an army. At the same time, the scouts sent by Jiang Pingji also desperately chased after Qin Gong and Bai Ning's troops. Unfortunately, it was night and visibility was limited. It took them a lot of effort to find the route of the 2 troops. They hurriedly chased after them, which wasted a lot of time. By the time they caught up with the 2 troops, the situation had changed. Bai Ning was cautious by nature. Even if he led the troops to chase after the enemy, he would still consider his surroundings. Therefore he was slower. When the scouts caught up, the army had not yet been ambushed. Bai Ning was also very surprised by the appearance of the scouts. The scouts did not have time to turn over and dismount from their horses. They directly conveyed the order. "Retreat." Bai Ning was stunned at first, then he immediately understood something. He immediately ordered the army to turn around and retreat. However, the enemy was secretly watching them. The army's retreat was obvious, so they could not sit still. The originally pitch-black call suddenly lit up with countless orange flames, and countless fire arrows descended from the sky. Bai Ning was shocked, but he still looked calm on the surface. The soldiers also seemed to have taken a tranquilizer. They defended and retreated in an orderly manner at the same time. Was he not panicking? How could it be? He was panicking to death. He never thought that this was a trap set by the enemy. However, Bai Ning knew that as the chief commander he could not panic. Once he panicked, the army would be like headless flies. They would run around without order and be surrounded and killed by the enemy sooner or later. If Bai Ning's luck was considered good, then Qin Gong's side was quite unlucky. He had completely stepped into the enemy's trap. When the scouts arrived, the scene was already in chaos. The two armies were fighting each other. The light of the fire spread, almost turning this part of the world into daylight. The soldiers' battle cries were sharp and resounding, as if they were about to pierce through one's eardrums. The enemy's sneak attack was quite sudden. Although Qin Gong was not injured, he remembered the time when he followed Yangtze and was blocked by Han Yu in the Langtze Canyon. He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. What kind of lousy luck did he have to be ambushed time and time again? It used to be Han Yu and now it was Wei Yong. However, they were lucky to have been saved by the Lord last time. Now they could only rely on themselves and the soldiers around them. If he didn't fight for a way out, he would probably be buried here. At this moment, Qin Gong was still thinking about what his lord had said before he sent out the troops. It's better not to say things like, "I'm going to get married after this battle, so that my wife and children can stay by my side." I don't know where I heard this before, but those who said this before the war basically never came back. Never to return? The enemy had set up this sneak attack with the intention of making them never come back. Qin Gong didn't want to die here. He still had to make contributions and accumulate merits, so that he could go back and marry the eldest lady of the Su family and protect her for the rest of her life. In the distant rear, Su Yanshao suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. The maid who was sleeping outside put on some clothes and came over. Is the eldest lady going to get up at night? When the maid brought the candle closer, she saw that Su Yanshao's nightgown was almost soaked with sweat. No. I just had a very scary dream, but now that I'm awake I can't remember what it was. The maid also said, "Look at the eldest lady's face covered with sweat, it must have been a nightmare. I'm going to ask the kitchen to prepare a bowl of soup for you." Su Yanshao shook her head. "No, it's the middle of the night. I won't be able to sleep after drinking soup." The maid said, "If that's the case, I'll stay and talk with the eldest lady for a while." Su Yanshao nodded lightly. The maid beside her was sent by Qin Gong. She was careful, considerate, and efficient. She quite liked her. When she thought of Qin Gong, an unexplainable panic rose in her left chest. "Eldest lady, are you feeling uncomfortable?" The maid saw her raising her hand to cover her chest, frowning slightly and her lips pale. She suddenly became nervous. Su Yanshao said, "The dream I had just now seemed to be related to Qin Sanlang. Did something happen to him at the front?" Since the two of them had a tacit understanding, Su Yanshao changed the way she addressed him and called him Qin Sanlang. It was neither too intimate nor too distant. The maid said, "Old people always say that dreams are the opposite of reality. Qin Langjun is good at fighting, how could something happen to him?" Su Yanshao was skeptical, but she still felt uneasy. The maid tried to coax her to sleep. Su Yanshao couldn't help but put her hand under the pillow, and her fingertips touched a cold jade hairpin. "I learned it from the craftsman. This fox hairpin is crudely carved. When the war at the front is over, I'll give it to the eldest lady." Su Yanshao couldn't help but hold it tightly as if it could absorb some strength. "You said you would come back and marry me?" She had been embroidering a wedding dress these days, and it would be finished in half a year, just in time for her hairpin ceremony. After that, they would get married. The maid heard her whisper and laughed. Apart from the eldest lady, who else could Qin Langjun have in his heart? Su Yanshao couldn't help but blush, and her flustered mood calmed down a lot. The situation on Qin Gong's side was indeed not that bad. Relying on the valiant fighting quality of the army, even if the enemy's attack was fierce, they could still maintain their formation and not collapse. As the battle dragged on, the situation gradually stabilized. After all, Qin Gong was a mortal and he couldn't be invulnerable. He was seriously injured in the chaos, but he didn't seem to feel it. He commanded the enemy to kill, and seized the opportunity to break out of the encirclement. "We shouldn't continue fighting. Since this is the enemy's trap, the longer we delay, the more disadvantageous it will be for us." Qin Gong was injured, but his mind was very clear. In the face of the enemy's ambush, they could only try to reduce their losses. Of the 36 stratagems, retreat is the best. The deputy general on the side said, "General, do you feel that something is wrong?" Qin Gong covered his arm and his expression was somewhat fierce. "The number of the enemy's troops is strange. They most likely divided their troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Since this was a killing trap set by the enemy, it meant that the previous retreat of the Nye family due to internal strife was fake. The enemy still had more than 200,000 troops. Even if they divided their troops into 3 groups, The number of troops lying in ambush was obviously not that many. It was not difficult to speculate that the enemy was very likely to transfer the remaining troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Luring the enemy into the trap, luring the tiger away from the mountain, one was linked to the other and it was clearly a killing trap. The deputy general said, "General, what should we do?" Chapter 1530. I've long heard that Lu Shi has many elites under his command, but I didn't expect that we couldn't keep them here. Fan Chen watched as the enemy fought and retreated, and his heart was filled with impatience and indescribable helplessness. If it had been any other vassal's army, they would have long been thrown into disarray after encountering such an ambush. Not to mention retreating in a short period of time, it was already a blessing from the heavens that the entire army had not been wiped out. Comparisons were odious. Was Jiang Pingji born to teach other feudal vassals how to behave? Jiang Pingji was not only the legendary child of another family, but also the lord of another family. There was nothing to be envious of. The trusted general in charge of the ambush rode forward and asked Fan Chen's opinion with a solemn expression. "Military counselor, should we pursue them?" "Of course. Zixuan has given a strict order to delay as much time as possible." Fan Chen raised his hand to wipe the hot sweat from his forehead. His inner shirt, which was stuck to his neck, was drenched. He said, "Lu Shi's subordinates are all clever. I guess they've discovered that the number of troops ambushing them isn't right. Even if they think with their toes, they'll know that we'll deploy troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass." "Yes, sir." The general didn't dare to waste time. He ordered the troops to pursue the enemy. They couldn't let the enemy ruin their plan. "General, they're catching up." The deputy general's face was covered in blood. Only his black eyes were clean. "Don't panic. Just fight and retreat." Qin Gong's expression was firm. His face was covered in blood, making the brown scar on his face look even more terrifying. "Is that Nye camp ahead? When we left, the fire wasn't so strong." The deputy general said, "General, do you mean there are enemies over there?" Qin Gong's expression was solemn. "The Lord is ambushed over there. We have to rush there no matter what." According to the scouts sent by the Lord, she was ambushed at Nye camp. However, Nye camp had long been empty. Where did the ambush come from? After thinking about it, Qin Gong thought of the underground. The enemy was most likely hiding underground and hiding from the eyes and ears of our army. However, how did they hide the soil from our scouts when they dug so many pits to hide people? The person who arranged this ambush was truly terrifying. Whether it was in terms of scheming a person's heart or in other aspects, it was almost flawless. Zhejiang had a bad feeling when he heard this. The Lord had been ambushed in the enemy's lair. What kind of F***ck was that? Zhanjiang Pass? Not only was the deputy general worried about his lord, but he was also worried about his own nest. He was really worried that his nest would be destroyed. Qin Gong said confidently, "Zhanjiang Pass has sufficient troops, and there are a few strategists overseeing it. We won't lose it." Due to the enemy's relentless pursuit, Qin Gong's side had to pay a few more casualties before they managed to shake off their pursuers. Along the way, they bumped into the remnants of Bai Ning's army. If they hadn't reacted in time, they might have had to fight in the dark. "Brother Qin, you're not dead, right?" Qin Gong smiled bitterly as he pulled out the arrow from his arm. He took out a piece of cloth and tied it around the wound, temporarily stopping the bleeding. He was in so much pain that his face was pale. He said in a loud voice, "I'm not dead. I'm alive and kicking." Bai Ning said, "Reorganize the troops, turn around and kill these bugs that are chasing us." Qin Gong panted heavily and said, "The Lord has been ambushed. General Bai, it's better not to continue fighting." Bai Ning waved his hand and said casually, "That's easy. Brother Qin, take half of the troops to support the Lord. I'll lead some people to delay the pursuers." At that moment there was no better way. Qin Gong cupped his fists and said, "General Bai, take care." "No problem." Bai Ning laughed. "I didn't get to drink your wedding wine and my precious daughter's wedding wine. When I go to hell I'll make a scene." Qin Gong ordered half of the troops to support Jiang Pingji. Seeing that he had left, Bai Ning angrily spat out a mouthful of blood and clenched the blood-stained weapon in his hand. The sticky blood had dried up and some of it was still warm. He shouted in the direction of the enemy. "All troops fall into formation." As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers on the side raised their horns and blew them to convey the military order. As soon as the military order was given, the soldiers with shields lined up in the first echelon, forming a thick defensive wall on one side. The other hand held a long spear that was more than 10 feet long to block the first enemy that rushed up. The second echelon of soldiers also held long spears and assisted in cleaning up the fish that slipped through the net. The archers were in the third echelon, trying their best to seize the opportunity to cause heavy damage to the enemy. Bai Ning said in a gruff voice, "I'm standing here. No one can get past me." Although Bai Ning was not young, his archery skills were ranked among the best in the army. His specialty was shooting 7 arrows at the same time. He used a 2-stone heavy bow. When he shot an arrow, not only could he poke a hole in a person's head, but he could also skewer the next person. The eyes of the two sides were bloodshot. Bai Ning's quiver was out of ammunition, so he picked up his weapon and rushed forward. He killed until his weapon was bent. At the same time, the situation on Jiang Pingji's side was much better than Bai Ning and Qin Gong had imagined. Apart from the unexpected first wave of sneak attacks, they basically did not suffer much in the subsequent confrontations. People could not see the entire battle situation, but Jiang Pingji had a spiritual realm. Within the realm, even flying insects and mosquitoes were under her control, not to mention people. She knew where the army was the weakest, where they needed support, and where the enemy could break through. Under her command, the army calmly withdrew from the enemy's ambush. How could the enemy let go of a fat piece of meat that was already in their mouths? Of course they would bite like mad dogs. "My lord, the reinforcements are here." Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. What's going on with the reinforcements? It was impossible for reinforcements to come at this time. Jiang Pingji was a very cautious person. Even if she led the army to attack the enemy, she was prepared for a sneak attack on her base. It was better to be safe than sorry. Even if all the information showed that Nie Liang did not have the opportunity to clean up the hidden dangers within the Nie family, Jiang Pingji had laughed at this point. At that time she mocked Nie Liang for being too soft on his people, but in the end he was the one who suffered the consequences. The last time she received news from the Nie family was only 3 to 5 days before Nie Liang died of illness. The few tumors of the Nie family were still alive and well. According to the time of Nie Liang's death, even if he instructed Wei Yong and the others to clean up the tumors before he died, it was reasonable to say that it was too late. Due to various reasons, Jiang Pingji was skeptical about the two speculations of internal strife in the Nie family and Wei Yong's withdrawal of troops. Now that they had encountered an ambush, it proved that the two speculations were false. Not only did Wei Yong not withdraw his troops, but it was very likely that he had mobilized his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. The ambush was just a ploy to delay the troops. Countless thoughts flashed through Jiang Pingji's mind. The soldier said, "The reinforcements were brought by General Qin." Not long after he finished speaking, Qin Gong, who was covered in blood, had already ridden forward. "My lord, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Jiang Pingji asked, "Did you meet General Bai on the way?" Chapter 1531. My lord, Zhanjiang Pass. Although Qin Gong looked confident, he was not sure if Zhanjiang Pass could be defended against a sneak attack. Jiang Pingji said, "Don't worry. I told Wen Zheng and the rest to be careful before the army set off. Zhanjiang Pass will definitely not be lost." Qin Gong was slightly relieved, but he still had doubts. Jiang Pingji noticed this and smiled to comfort him. "If Zhanjiang Pass is breached, I will hug the keyboard and kneel in front of the old chief until I die." Qin Gong was speechless. "Old chief? Keyboard? What the hell?" Jiang Pingji coughed softly and covered up her words perfectly. She was getting more and more adept at lying. "The old chief was the one who gave me the strange book in my dream. Later he continued to teach me in my dream. He's like a teacher and a friend." Qin Gong suddenly realized. "I see." What she said was not entirely false. The old chief had indeed trained her meticulously in the few years between choosing his successor and retiring. Teacher and friend. It was not wrong to use these words to describe their relationship. Jiang Pingji was a wolf. She was aggressive and liked to cause trouble. She wanted to challenge the authority and position of the alpha wolf all the time. The new and old chief often fought because of disagreements. The old chief was a man who looked like a smiling tiger but was tough on the inside. Jiang Pingji was tough and arrogant from the inside out. One was the alpha wolf who was about to retire, the other was the new alpha wolf. It would be strange if they did not fight. Of course, the old chief had been a commander for more than 100 years and had been through countless wars. Jiang Pingji was still a new driver on the road. Even if she could fight, she was tortured badly at first. Later on, she barely managed to fight to a draw. It was the only time they tied. Jiang Pingji suspected that the other party went easy on her. "I'm leaving tomorrow. The 7th Army is the best army in the Federation. I hope you don't ruin its reputation." Jiang Pingji was so tired that she could not even move her fingers. Her mouth was still hard and smelly. The future belongs to more outstanding young people. The 7th Army will become stronger and sharper in my hands. No one will dare to offend me. Look at what she said. She was just short of saying that the other party was old and should have given up his position long ago. However, the old general smiled and said, "All right, I'll leave the faith of the 7th Army to you." The two women were sweating profusely as they lay on the training ground. Compared to Jiang Pingji's disheveled appearance, the other woman was still standing. I still don't know why the old general retired? You're not old enough to retire. The average lifespan of a commoner in the Federation was around 250 years. Someone like Jiang Pingji could live up to 500 years. At that time, the old chief was only a little more than 200. He was at the prime of his life. Otherwise, he would not have been able to suppress Jiang Pingji, who was an unreasonable wolf cub. In fact, this old commander's position in the Federation was second only to the marshal, and he was extremely experienced. Just because they had a lifespan of 500 years did not mean that they would live to be 500 years old. The average lifespan of a soldier in the army was less than 100 years old. Even though a legion commander was a high-ranking member of the army, it was still a high-risk job. 99% of legion commanders died on the front lines. Very few of them died of old age, let alone retire midway. At that time, many people even mocked the First Battle Legion for producing a coward who was afraid of death. My body is not suited to stay in this position. It looks fine now, but I don't know when it will collapse. You'll know the inside story when you have a higher level of authority. The old chief sighed. The 7th Legion has always been the vanguard with the strongest combat power. I won't be able to hold on for long, but the 7th Legion must have a capable and unyielding successor who can carry the flag. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Was it because she was the best at fighting? If the old chief's current combat state was not good, then what about when he was at his peak? The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. The old chief sneered. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about when I'll be able to press you to the ground and beat you up. Hey, you went easy on me just now. The amount of water you used was comparable to a dam releasing water. Was she a salted fish that needed to go easy on him? You haven't awakened yet. Even if my condition has deteriorated, I won't lose to a girl who hasn't awakened yet. Jiang Pingji looked at the rising flames in the Nye camp. She did not know why she thought of the past. At that time she was too tired. She was exhausted after the fierce battle. In the end, the old chief carried her to the warm cabin like a burlap sack. When she woke up, the old chief had already packed his things and left the military headquarters. Jiang Pingji was in a hurry to take office. The front line of the Federation was at war again, so she forgot about this matter. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly remembered something. What the hell did the old chief mean by awakening? It was fine if she did not remember, but now that she remembered, she had to clarify. It was the same logic as obsessive-compulsive disorder. She would feel uncomfortable if she did not clarify. However, before that, there was one more thing to do. Jiang Pingji took Qin Gong and the troops under her tent to rescue Bai Ning. Bai Ning was in a sorry state at that moment. His arms and thighs were injured, and the armor on his body was tattered. Many parts of the armor were pockmarked by the enemy's weapons. If it was not for the fact that the armor was well made and that he had been injured for Bai Ning a few times, he would have been dismounted and trampled into meat paste by the chaotic army. He did not have time to check the condition of his wound. After killing a wave of enemies in a hurry, he used a strip of cloth to stop the bleeding. His left hand was almost numb. Their side suffered heavy casualties, but the enemy did not gain much advantage either. The number of casualties was also high. However, because of the disparity in military strength, Bai Ning's side could not hold on for much longer. Once the army's formation was broken by the enemy, the result would be 1,000 miles of retreat and they would be crushed into meat paste by the enemy. Let's fight to the death with these bastards. It's not a loss to die here. Bai Ning's eyes were bloodshot. Even though he was injured all over, he did not care. Kill one to recoup his losses, kill two to earn a small profit. Even if he died, he would drag a few more down with him. Just as Bai Ning was about to launch the last attack, the enemy ordered the archers to release a rain of arrows again. In the end, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Because it was night time, the pale golden ripples that shrouded the army were particularly clear. A miracle? Nye Jun saw this, and his high and mighty momentum instantly dropped. The arrows stopped in mid-air as if they were intercepted by the layer of ripples. They lost their momentum and fell with a rustle, hitting Bai Ning's head. My lord is here? He had seen this scene before, and he was sure that it was his lord. Is his life more important than yours? Jiang Pingji led the troops over. When she saw Bai Ning's sorry state, she suddenly became angry. Are a bunch of good-for-nothings worth paying with your life? Jiang Pingji reprimanded Bai Ning angrily. Bai Ning was prepared to fight to the death, but now that his lord was here, he did not know what expression to put on. He could only listen to the reprimand obediently. Little did he know that his seemingly majestic lord was also being reprimanded by another person. Yuaba, you were ambushed and attacked. Where is your spiritual realm? Jiang Pingji quibbled, I didn't want to cheat too much, so my realm only covered a few feet around me. Yuaba, it's obvious that you've been pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger for too long. What's the use of these excuses? The old chief's mouth is quite sharp. Yuaba, if you return to the Federation in this state, won't the 7th Army be assimilated into a pig farm? Not using too much ability doesn't mean that you have to be schemed against like real people in ancient times. Jiang Xiaojiu, I've prepared the keyboard for you. Chapter 1532. My lord. Bai Ning clearly felt that his lord's mood was not right. He didn't dare to raise his voice for fear of igniting the firecracker. Jiang Pingji gripped the hilt of her sword tightly and sneered, order the soldiers to get into formation and face the enemy. Tonight no one can leave. Bai Ning's body trembled and his voice was like thunder. Yes, my lord. Ordinary soldiers couldn't feel it, but Qin Gong and Bai Ning, who were near Jiang Pingji, were secretly shocked. Most of the generals who had some achievements in martial arts could feel qi, such as the enemy's murderous aura and the murderous intent in the dark. Their awareness combined with their reflexes, which had been trained for a long time, allowed them to avoid many fatal attacks. The stronger their martial arts, the clearer their perception. There was no doubt that Qin Gong, who became famous at a young age, and Bai Ning, who was experienced and ruthless, belonged to this category. They clearly felt a strong murderous intent emanating from their lord's body. Not only did they feel uncomfortable, but the warhorses around them were also affected. Bai Ning didn't care about the injuries on his body. He was speechless and said, My God, how many people has my lord killed? To cultivate such a murderous aura, it was probably not enough to kill 1,000 people. She probably needed to kill 10,000 people. No matter how many times he tried, Bai Ning couldn't associate his lord, who was usually playful, angry, and talkative, with her decisive killing on the battlefield. It was like he couldn't bear to see Li Hanmei kill people on the battlefield with a gun and go home to pick up a sweater to knit. Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't hear Bai Ning's complaints. She gave several military orders in a row. The enemies who caught up were shocked when they saw the formation. Some of the generals couldn't help but sneer. Are the troops under Lu Shi's command indulging in fantasy? Isn't that right? Now they're like stray dogs. How can a group of defeated generals and soldiers make a comeback? Some people sneered. Naturally, there were also people who were secretly shocked. Some even had the idea of fighting back. The reinforcements who arrived late didn't see it, but the first batch of soldiers who surrounded Bai Ning saw a miracle again. The sky full of arrows was blocked by a layer of strange golden ripples. The gods had personally participated in the battle. They were just a group of ordinary people. Could they defeat the gods? Thus, one wave of soldiers had high morale while the other wave had low morale. When the two were compared, the effect was very obvious. No matter how the general scolded them, the group of soldiers did not dare to move forward. Some of them even muttered things like, God is coming, and God will curse us to death. Their legs were trembling and their hands were weak. They were so scared that they pushed back. Seeing this, the general could only attack angrily. He chopped off the heads of 3 or 4 deserters, intimidating the group of soldiers in an instant. Whoever dares to take a step back will end up like this. The soldiers at the front were still dealing with the enemy, but these cowards actually wanted to desert. It was better for them to die so as not to affect the morale of the army. The soldier cried, It's not that we want to escape. It's obviously that God is here. God is here. Arrows can't hurt them. The general sneered, Can't injure him? Spouting nonsense and disturbing the morale of the army, this is a crime worthy of death. After saying that, the general cut off the soldier's head. Because he used a lot of strength, he even cut off half of the soldier's upper body. After killing more than 10 people in a row, the chaos was finally suppressed. The cowardly soldiers could only charge forward again. The general revealed a disdainful sneer and shook off the warm blood on the blade. What God? What can't hurt them? If they had this ability, what happened to those enemy soldiers who died tragically because of their sneak attack? The two armies fought fiercely and both sides suffered casualties. Didn't they see that the enemy not only had the corpses of their own soldiers, but also the corpses of the enemy soldiers? What god? It's just a cheap trick to shake the morale of the army. What happened at the front line? Fan Chen came late and did not see the miracle. He only saw some of the soldiers being afraid to fight and disrupting the army formation, so he sent people out to suppress them. The general cupped his fists and reported, "It's just the enemy deliberately mystifying things, using some miracle to scare people." Fan Chen raised his eyebrows. Miracle? What miracle? The general roughly explained the process. Fan Chen frowned after listening. Is there something wrong? The general asked. Fan Chen suddenly thought of something. His expression was faintly excited, and the hand holding the reins trembled slightly. His breathing was rapid and excited, and he almost lost his voice. Maybe Lu Shi is also here. The general's eyes widened as if he did not hear what Fan Chen said. What did he mean by, Lu Shi is also here? Fan Chen said, Lu Shi is a person with unparalleled combat power. According to investigations, during the 3 years she was studying in Lengyue County, she often fought fiercely with others. Now that she has become a duke, she still does not change her bad habits. She goes to the front line to fight generals, and even more, she even wants to get involved in a chaotic battle between two armies. This was not the first time the general had heard this, but he always found it unbelievable. Why did the people always say, good men don't become soldiers, good women don't marry? It was not only because being a soldier was lowly and difficult to stand out, but also because the survival rate was low. No one wanted to bring up their own son or new husband to fight on the battlefield. From this, it could be seen how touching the survival rate was and how dangerous the battle between the two armies was. Dignified dukes actually fought in a chaotic battle like ordinary soldiers. What would happen if they were mistakenly killed in front of the battle? Not to mention dukes, ordinary generals would not personally participate in a chaotic battle. Even if they participated in the battle to kill, they would bring 20 to 30 bodyguards with them. Soldiers were easy to find, but generals who knew how to fight were not easy to find. Every one of them was considered a gold mine, and they could not be lost. Generals were like this, let alone dukes? Lu Shi left Zhanjiang Pass? Fan Chen sneered. That so-called miracle has only appeared twice. According to the thinking of the ancients, not everyone could be blessed by the gods. They only knew of Jiang Pingji. It was the same miracle, so could it be confirmed that Jiang Pingji was also at the front line? If that was the case, Fan Chen could not easily let her go. Jiang Pingji still had no heir. If she died here, the power she left behind would definitely collapse. Fan Chen was secretly calculating, but Jiang Pingji, the person in question, seemed to be on steroids. She killed people so quickly that even her own people were afraid. The enemies in front of her were not like living people, but more like straws in the field. She was not holding a sickle to cut straws, she was clearly driving a reaper to reap the heads of rows of people. This was not the scariest thing. The scariest thing was that after killing so many people, her eyes were still clear. What did this prove? It only proved that the enemies were not human in her eyes. Perhaps they were not even comparable to chickens and ducks. Ordinary people would feel uncomfortable killing too many chickens. Fortunately, this person was their lord and not their enemy. Because it was dark at night and their field of vision was limited, Fan Chen and the others had not noticed this area. He ordered the troops to split up and attack the rear. As soon as the troops were mobilized, Jiang Pingji knew his plan. Fengjing, go to the rear and command. The enemies are coming. She retreated after killing for a while. As soon as she approached, Qin Gong smelled the suffocating smell of blood. Yes. Chapter 1533. As soon as Fan Chen moved, Jiang Pingji knew that the sneak attack from the rear had failed. Instead, they had lost a lot of troops. I wonder how the battle at Zhanjiang Pass is. Jiang Pingji was already covered in blood. She looked terrifying, but the blood belonged to the enemy. Not even a strand of her hair was missing. There was a beep next to her ear. The old chief had sent her a private message. Your Abba. If you want to know what's going on over there, just use your spiritual realm. Don't tell me you're that weak. Jiang Pingji had transmigrated and changed into an ordinary person's body. It was understandable that her physical skills had declined, but it was not to the extent that her spiritual realm was weak. Lu Shi is an ordinary person. Excessive use of the spiritual realm will cause harm to this body. Besides, I haven't used it for years. I can't remember it now. Jiang Pingji smiled awkwardly. Her smile was covered by blood. Sincerity could not be seen. Instead, there was a hint of ferocity. It's not a good thing to be at ease for too long. I'm really worried that I won't be able to adapt to the pace of the Federation in the future. Although she said that, she still used her spiritual realm to take a look at the battle at Zhanjiang Pass. The city gate was secure. It had not been lost. The enemy had not succeeded yet. She quickly retracted it after taking a look. At the same time, Wuxia looked in a certain direction outside Zhanjiang Pass. His eyes showed some confusion. Just now I seem to have sensed the Lord. Was it an illusion? There were 150,000 enemies outside Zhanjiang Pass. Their battle cries shook the heavens. Flames soared into the sky and lit up the place until it was a city that never slept. With the previous lesson, Wuxia had brought enough troops and hundreds of catapults. The power of the siege was far greater than the previous time. As the saying goes, soldiers with arms and water with earth. No matter how many catapults the enemy had, the city gate was still secure. It was just that the battle on the city wall was particularly fierce. The stench of kerosene stimulated everyone's nerves. In everyone's eyes there was nothing else but the enemy. Tonight it was either the enemy or they who would die. What a tough bone to chew. He can still defend in this situation. The general of the Nye camp looked at the city wall covered with ladders and ropes. His expression was full of malice and ferocity. His black eyes were reflected by the flames. Wuxia said, "Lu Shi's vigilance is far beyond our imagination. If a sudden attack was launched, the defending side would not be prepared and would most likely be flustered." According to Nye Liang's plan before his death, Jiang Pingji was confident that she would dispatch the army to pursue the bait they had thrown out. The garrison at Zhanjiang Pass would be greatly weakened. They took advantage of the night to attack the city, and the enemy hastily responded. Faced with the Nye family's army that went all out, even if Jiang Pingji's side could resist for a while, they would definitely not be able to defend Zhanjiang Pass. In order to protect themselves, they could only lead their troops to abandon the pass and retreat. The result was a huge disappointment. Wei Long led his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Although the enemy hastily responded to the battle, they did not immediately collapse. Reinforcements arrived just in time. Jiang Pingji was far more cautious and meticulous than he and Nye Liang had imagined. She was clearly a 22 or 23-year-old woman, but her way of doing things was more cautious and cunning than a 45-year-old man. She had already believed the news of Nye Jun's retreat, and in the end she even ordered Zhanjiang Pass to be on high alert to prevent night attacks. He really didn't know whether he should say that she was doing something superfluous, or praise her for being as cunning as a fox, treacherous and suspicious. The general said fiercely, "So what if we're vigilant? We must pass this trial tonight." This time, Nye Jun was determined to take down Zhanjiang Pass. If they did not succeed this time, they did not know when the next opportunity would come. Of course, we must pass Zhanjiang Pass tonight. No matter what price they had to pay. Looking at the huge fireballs being hurled by the catapults onto the walls of Zhanjiang Pass, the battlements and even the city gates, Wei Long's state of mind was extremely calm. That Shizhong is still somewhat useful. Shizhong had been randomly slashed a few times by bandits with a hatchet. His right hand could not write for a short period of time. The wound on his cheek was too deep, causing his left eye to be completely blind. There was also an extremely long wound from his left shoulder to his collarbone. With such a serious injury, even if he had amazing willpower to copy and memorize the blueprint, his hands were not strong enough. He could not draw such a detailed blueprint at all. Since he could not draw, he thought of a plan and simply verbally explained. He verbally improved the existing armaments, such as coating the stones of the catapults with a layer of kerosene and igniting them before they were hurled. The lethality of fireballs and simple stones was not the same. After Shizhong's improvements, the catapults did indeed cause great pressure to the pass. Without Jiang Pingji, the godly archer, and due to the weather, the soldiers controlling the ballistae could not effectively destroy the enemy's catapults. After such a long time, they had only destroyed 4 or 5 catapults. In desperation, Wuxia could only order the catapults on the city walls to aim at the enemy's catapults. The efficiency was much higher than destroying the catapults with the ballistae. At the same time, they could also target the enemy's archers. There was still a stalemate above and below the city walls. For the time being, Zhanjiang Pass was not in danger of being lost. Jiang Pingji's side was much more relaxed. Even if the enemy outnumbered them, with her precise command, she could always make the enemy suffer losses. Not only that, she also took the time to ask the old chief about it, lest she forgot about it after the war. I remember before the old chief retired, he once mentioned awakening. What is that? You Abba, you're still half-hearted in war. If your subordinates knew about this, how would they feel? Don't change the topic. There was silence on the other side for a while, as if she had to rack her brains to think of a few sentences. You Abba, About this matter? Sai, the child has no mother. It's a long story. Make the long story short. Abba, the current power system of the Federation focuses on developing the limits of the human body. The key lies in the genes. Under normal circumstances, the genes of ordinary people will evolve with the development of inheritance from generation to generation. However, some geniuses can condense the evolution of hundreds or even thousands of years into a few short years. This is genetic unlocking, completely unlocking the shackles and exploding the limits of the human body. However, no one can answer how many genetic locks exist. Perhaps the end is the eternal life that all scientists dream of. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. Abba, I'm going off topic. The awakening I mentioned is essentially similar to genetic unlocking, but it's also different. The latter is to develop the potential of the human body, while the former is to trace back to the source and return to the ancestral inheritance. Why do you think the direct descendants of the Jiang family were attacked by the forces of the heavenly brain? Because the direct descendants of the Jiang family have an ancient bloodline. You are the last direct descendant and at the same time, the only one who has the chance to awaken the ancestral power. This power is what the defector heavenly brain fears the most. Only you can completely kill it. What if I can't awaken? Abba, die. The Federation will be buried with you. Don't worry, I'll mail you the best coffin. Heartless woman. Jiang Pingji curled her lips. No, this body belongs to Lu Shi. How can I awaken? Abba, the ancient bloodline of the Jiang family is rather special. It doesn't attach to the body but to the soul. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes as if remembering something. The awakening thing can change hair color? Chapter 1534. Changing gender? So vicious? Jiang Pingji said that, but her eyes lit up. She was eager to try. Abba, what do you want to do? Based on her understanding of Jiang Pingji, it was probably not a good thing. She had no integrity at all. Jiang Pingji said, well, we are all adults. Let's not beat around the bush. I want to cry Zixiao. Your Abba, you should really let your little girl see what kind of animal you are. What kind of tricks are you thinking about? Jiang Pingji muttered, just tell me if it's possible. Abba, no, give up. The Jiang family's atavistic ability is fire control. It doesn't support gender change. Fire control? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain. Isn't this the same ability derived from unlocking my genes? She thought it would be some amazing special ability. In the end, it was just playing with fire. Abba, it's different. Before the awakening, it was normal fire. After the awakening, the fire can burn everything. It's said to be the fire of extreme yang that can cleanse everything. Even the Federation's warships with the strongest defense can't withstand the damage of that kind of fire. Not only can it burn physical bodies, but it can also burn spiritual energy and life. Awakening the ancient bloodline ability, apart from the change of the fire, will also strengthen the body by 100 times. At the same time, it will greatly increase one's lifespan. Sky Brain hated the direct descendants of the Jiang family. Besides the old grudge from 2,000 years ago, there was another reason. Jiang Pingji echoed, it's really good. I won't need flint to start a fire in the future. Abba. To be honest, if your ancestors heard what you said, they would most likely die with grievances. Including Jiang Pingji, there were only 3 awakened in 2,000 years. The first 2 were famous people who killed so many enemies of the Federation that they were terrified. But Jiang Pingji used them to start a fire? Be a little more promising, okay? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but roll her eyes. What was the use of her ability no matter how amazing it was? The enemy was a group of ordinary people. In order not to bully them, she restrained her spiritual domain. What else could she do? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but complain. If I don't use it to start a fire, what else can I do? Didn't the old chief just say that the fire after awakening can burn spiritual energy? In the words of this era, the human spirit is the so-called 3 souls and 7 spirits. This fire of mine is enough to extinguish a person's soul. It's just a war, there's no need to be so ruthless. All in all, this is a useless cheat. For the current her, it was indeed useless. Your Abba. His words were reasonable and no one could refute him. Jiang Pingji's current state was like a main account with a full set of godly equipment going to the beginner's village. She could still defeat all the other players in the village without her godly equipment. To put it bluntly, it was meaningless to give her a set of godly equipment at that moment. The old commander felt that he should redeem himself. Your Abba, don't underestimate it. It will be very useful in the future. The old chief went offline, leaving Jiang Pingji with a lot of questions. Jiang Pingji looked at the chaotic battle and took a deep breath. She told herself again and again that this was a battle between ordinary people. She had to restrain herself. Although Jiang Pingji had been talking to the old chief for a few minutes, she did not stop killing the enemies. No matter if it was an enemy or a comrade, no one would have thought that Jiang Pingji could still be distracted by talking to someone while she was on a killing spree. If they knew, they would be so depressed that they would vomit blood. Of course, Fan Qin and the others were depressed enough. No matter how they ambushed or how they deployed their troops to attack, the enemy seemed to have predicted their actions in advance. Their defense was impenetrable. Even if they outnumbered the enemy by a lot, they did not have much of an advantage. At that moment, news came from the front line. Military advisor, the enemy has a valiant general. His combat power is really terrifying. The soldiers can't stop him at all. This statement was embellished. In fact, the soldiers in that area were scared out of their wits. Almost no one dared to advance and attack. If they did not take any measures, the enemy might use that area as a breakthrough and counterattack. Fan Qin asked, "Terrifying? How terrifying can he be? 100 people can't do anything to him." Fan Qin frowned slightly. It seemed that he did not expect Jiang Pingji to have such an inhuman existence. To describe someone's bravery, people always like to use, "One man can hold the pass against 10,000, or 1 man can fight against 100. Whether it was 10,000, or 1 man can fight against 100, the words 10,000 and 100 were empty words. The general idea was that there were many people, not really 10,000 or 100. Even if it was a highly skilled general, when faced with hundreds of enemies, he would most likely lose his life. No matter how skilled he was, he had 2 hands and 2 feet. There was a limit to his physical strength. It was impossible for him to not be tired or injured. If Jiang Pingji really had such a general under her command, she should have some reputation. Unless, a light flashed in Fan Qin's mind. He suddenly thought of something. He just speculated that Jiang Pingji was very likely to be at the front of the battle. At that moment, a young general with unparalleled bravery appeared. Could it be, how is Lu Shi's combat power? He asked the deputy general beside him. This deputy general was someone who had seen Jiang Pingji fight generals at the front of the battle. The deputy general answered honestly, "This person is a brave general that is rare in the world. If I were to fight him, I wouldn't last more than half a cup of tea." Jiang Pingji had fought generals at the front of the battle and killed several people in a row. Those generals were all ranked highly in the Nye camp. "Why are you suddenly asking about this, military counselor?" Fan Qin said, "Take a guess. Is it possible that the young general who reported to us just now is Lu Shi?" The deputy general was shocked by Fan Qin's speculation. Is this possible?" He expressed that he did not understand the way the vassal's brain worked. It was fine to fight generals. If one's martial strength was high, there was a high chance of survival in a one-on-one fight. However, it was a chaotic battle now. The soldiers of the 2 armies could only rely on the color of the cloth tied around their armors, necks, or arms to distinguish between the enemy and their allies. As a vassal, it was fine that she did not stay at the rear and came to launch a sneak attack. Now she even dared to intervene in a chaotic battle. He admired her for being a man. Fan Qin said coldly, "There is a 70% to 80% chance that it is accurate." Even if it was not accurate, Fan Qin wanted this young general to die here. Jiang Pingji had such a capable general under her command. It would greatly boost the morale of the 2 armies when they fought. It would be a disaster to keep him alive. Fan Qin's speculation was naturally correct. The person who was unrestrained and killed 300 enemy troops in a short time of half a stick of incense was Jiang Pingji. "I feel like my identity has been exposed." After a while, Jiang Pingji clearly felt that the enemy was deliberately targeting her. Chapter 1535. The enemy underestimated the power of the iron whip. When they aimed their long spears at White, which was under Jiang Pingji's crotch, Jiang Pingji waved her long whip and tied up all their spears like a snake. She exerted strength in her wrists and easily snatched the spears from the hands of more than a dozen people. She flicked her whip again and returned the spears to the enemy. Some pierced through the cheeks, some aimed at the neck, and some pierced through the heart. They couldn't even touch Whitey, let alone hurt Jiang Pingji. That was a pain in the ass. Fan Qin was extremely dissatisfied with the progress. So many people couldn't take down one person? His warhorse is still full of vigor and vitality? The general said, "It's not that we are incompetent, it's because the enemy is too evil." Not to mention Jiang Pingji, the horse she was riding was evil. No matter how many people tried to stab the horse with their spears, they always hit an invisible but real barrier and couldn't move an inch. The soldiers were confused by the change. While they were in a daze, the general on the horse used his iron whip to sweep away the spears or directly hit the heads of the soldiers who surrounded him. It was not an exaggeration. The strength of the iron whip could really break the neck and send the head flying. The deputy general didn't even know how to describe how bloody and violent the scene was. Fan Shen said, "It's really Lu Shi. No matter what price we have to pay, we can't let this person live." The general sighed secretly and cupped his hands in acknowledgement. In order to arouse the fighting spirit of his soldiers, he directly called out Jiang Pingji's identity. As the saying goes, brave men are bound to be rewarded with a great reward. Under Fan Chen's instruction, the general showed the reward. This person is Lu Shi, the feudal lord. Whoever can take his head will be rewarded with 100,000 taels of gold and a title of nobility. 100,000 taels of gold? A title of nobility? The high reward made the eyes of the timid soldiers red. One by one they rushed forward without a care for their lives. They were soldiers who hung their heads on their waistbands. There was no tomorrow and they didn't know when they would be able to stand out. Now that there was an opportunity in front of them, they had to fight for it even if it meant risking their lives. Maybe they could steal Jiang Pingji's head. Now that he had obtained the head, he would be rewarded with 100,000 gold coins and a noble title. He would only need to enjoy it for the rest of his life. When Jiang Pingji's identity was exposed, Bai Ning and the other two hurriedly sent soldiers to escort Jiang Pingji to retreat, but their lord refused. "A bunch of trash wants my head?" Jiang Pingji felt humiliated. Not to mention a group of ordinary soldiers, even her colleagues from her previous life did not have the confidence to take her head. Did they really think that her head was made of paper and that anyone could covet it? You're courting death. Jiang Pingji alone attracted half of the enemy's firepower. The enemy archers aimed at her and White, who was under her crotch. Fan Shen felt that Jiang Pingji deserved to die, but he did not know that Jiang Pingji was a ghost. Even the king of hell did not dare to take her life. The rain of arrows came from all directions. Those that could be shot down would be shot down, and those that couldn't be shot down would be blocked by the spiritual domain. She did not have to worry even if the enemy rushed over. Sending someone's head from 1,000 miles away, the gift was light, but the sentiment was heavy. How could she not accept it? Bai Ning, who was seriously injured, was ordered by Jiang Pingji to command and dispatch. He could not easily go forward. He could only listen to the soldiers' battle reports. Through a few words he knew what shocking feat his lord had done. The enemy's corpses around her could pile up into a small hill. Qin Gong's injuries were relatively light, so he could lead the troops to support Jiang Pingji. "I have to inform the military counselors about this when I get back." He was not a person who liked to snitch, but he really could not stand his lord running around with the enemy. If Qiguan Rang and the others were there, Jiang Pingji would not dare to be so brazen. They were not there and Qin Gong and Bai Ning could not suppress her. Even if his lord bore a grudge, Qin Gong still had to snitch. The night was dark. The two armies were fighting to the death. Almost everyone had lost their minds. A soldier had just stabbed an enemy to death, but in the next second the enemy's blade pierced him full of holes. While the battle here was in a stalemate, the killing at Zhanjiang Pass was even more tragic. Wei Yong had obviously come prepared this time. Even though Wei Ci and the others had already thought of ways to destroy more than 50 of their catapults, there were still brand new catapults pushed up by the soldiers to replace those that had been smashed to pieces. The firepower was fierce and the attack did not decrease. It was very dangerous on the city wall. Qiguan Rang and the others could only retreat to command so as to avoid being accidentally injured by the catapults. "My lord is very right about one thing, the Nye family is rich and powerful. We are really inferior to them." Qiguan Rang's newly made feather fan had long been burnt to a crisp. His sleeves were also burned with a few holes. He looked very pathetic. Wei Ci smiled bitterly when he heard that. The Nye family was indeed rich and powerful. Old Master Sun Wen said with a gloomy expression, "They are determined to break through Zhanjiang Pass. If this situation continues, I'm afraid we won't be able to defend it." It was not that our army was not strong enough. It was just that the enemy's numbers and firepower exceeded the limits of what we could withstand. In this siege, the losses of both sides were more tragic than the previous one. If it was in the past, Wei Yong would have long retreated in the face of such a huge loss. But this time, it was as if he had taken the wrong medicine and was unforgiving. Qiguan Rang said, "Wei Yong doesn't feel bad about such a huge loss." Wei Ci said, according to his character he won't easily withdraw his troops at this time. Of course, it's best not to withdraw either. Qiguanrang asked Wei Ci with his eyes. Wei Ci said, "My lord is still outside Zhanjiang Pass. If eldest brother knows, he will definitely send troops back to help. My lord will be in danger. If Zhanjiang Pass was lost, it was lost. They could fight back sooner or later. But if my lord was gone, then it was really irreversible." Qiguanrang sighed secretly. His lord was such a worrisome person. At this time old Master Sun Wen said, "If we can't defend it, we might as well retreat to Erdeo City." Wei Ci asked, "Zidao means, to let go of Zhanjiang Pass? If my lord finds out, she will definitely be furious." Sun Wen said, "This is called advancing by retreating." Jiang Pingji knew that the Nye family was difficult to deal with, so she was unusually cautious when defending. Not only did they build a barbican, but they also built a temporary city wall to cushion the enemy's troops. Sun Wen said, "The area outside the city wall of Zhanjiang Pass is controlled by the enemy. It's also quite convenient for them to transport catapults and scaling ladders without any obstruction, but it's a burden for our army. It's better to let go of this city wall and retreat to Erdeo City. The distance between Guanmen Pass and Erdeo City is quite far. If the enemy wants to attack Erdeo City, they can only go through the city gate. Although the city gate is tall and wide, there are tens of thousands of enemies. It's impossible for all of them to rush in at once. It'll take even more time to transport ladders, catapults, and other supplies in." The newly built Erdeo City's defensive ability was slightly weaker, but it could still cushion the enemy's troops and buy time for their own side. If the enemy wanted to rush in, they would definitely disrupt the army's formation. It might even lead to the predicament of the reinforcements not being able to arrive in time. Because of the city gate, the enemy's catapults could not reach Erdeo City in time, imperceptibly weakening the enemy's combat power. Sometimes, a strategic retreat was also to lure the enemy into taking the bait. Chapter 1536. Wei Ci looked hesitant. Even if he knew that old Master Sun Wen's plan was feasible, there were too many variables. Since ancient times, how many fake retreats had become real collapses because of unforeseen events? Soldiers did not know the plans of their superiors. They only knew that if they were defeated by the enemy and fled, it would definitely affect the overall morale. Morale was something that could not be seen or touched, but it was too useful on the battlefield. With high morale, even rookies could chase elites around. With low morale, even the best elites could not defeat the enemy's grassroots. Wei Ci was not against old Master Sun Wen's plan. He just wanted to minimize the negative impact of a retreat. Seeing this, Qiguanrang chose a compromise. "Let me command here to resist for a while. The two of you go to Erdeo City to prepare for the enemy," Qiguanrang said decisively. "If we retreat at the last minute, the soldiers will think that we are no match for the Nye army. If we make arrangements in advance, the impact of the retreat should be minimized." Of course, Wei Ci could not agree to leave Qiguanrang alone to command. Even with the help of several generals, he could not take care of the entire battle situation alone. At this moment they were already stretched thin. If Wei Ci and Sun Wen left, Qiguanrang would be under considerable pressure. Qiguanrang shook his head and said, "There's no time to lose. Go and prepare as soon as possible. Looking at the situation, the city gate can still hold for a quarter of an hour." Wei Ci and old Master Sun Wen looked at each other and did not continue to object. This was not the time to waste time. Any delay would cost countless lives. "Someone?" Qiguanrang's eyes darkened. He summoned the soldiers and said, "Immediately send people to pile the extra stones at the entrance of the city gate." The enemy's attack was fierce. Even though the soldiers on the city gate had tried their best to kill the enemy soldiers carrying the siege logs, there would be another batch after they were killed. The enemy tried their best to cover them. When dozens of people carried the siege logs and hit the city gate, Qiguanrang could feel the ground tremble slightly under his feet. Even though the main materials of the city gate were thick solid wood, bronze, and fine iron, it could not withstand such violent ravages. Since the city gate would be breached sooner or later, it was better to seize the time to block the enemy. "Military counselor, if the city gate is blocked..." The general looked hesitant. He was one of the people who knew that his lord had led troops to attack the enemy at night. If the entrance was blocked, not only would it hinder the enemy, but it would also hinder the return of his lord. Qiguanrang said coldly, "You only need to obey military orders and not question them in front of the battlefield. I know what to do in an emergency." The general cupped his fists and said, "Yes, sir." After saying that, He immediately ordered his men to use a portion of the stones to block the entrance of the city. The entrance to the city was blocked. Even if the enemy continued to use their siege weapons to break open the city gate, it would not be easy for them to charge into Zhanjiang Pass. Calculating, they should be able to delay for a while. Why are the two military counselors back? Could it be Feng Yi was arranging for the soldiers to send the city defense equipment to the front line? Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Wei Ci and the other man rushing over. Her heart thumped. Wei Ci raised his hand to stop Feng Yi from speaking. He said briefly, "The frontline city gate has not fallen." Feng Yi's eyes were filled with worry. Even though they were so far away, he could still hear what was happening in Yidao City. He was constantly on tenterhooks, but there was a limit to what he could do. He could only try his best to do what he could. While busy, he enriched himself and gained experience. Sun Wen asked, "Where's Lan Lan?" Feng Yi said, "There are too many wounded soldiers sent over from the front line. To prevent chaos, Sun Lan is helping to direct the transfer of the wounded soldiers to the casualty barracks." When the two armies fought, the number of soldiers who died on the spot was not high. Most of the soldiers died because they were not treated in time. Jiang Pingji was clear about this. Naturally, she had to take measures to reduce the death rate. For this purpose, she even specially set up a combat medical battalion. The soldiers of this battalion had to learn a certain amount of first aid knowledge. They also had to learn combat skills from ordinary soldiers. Their duty was to specifically transfer the wounded soldiers who had lost their combat ability but were not yet dead. Their medical knowledge did not have to be better than the military doctors in the casualty barracks, but they had to know how to minimize the secondary damage of the wounded soldiers when transferring them. Their combat skills did not have to be better than the combat troops, but they had to learn how to protect themselves. The soldiers of this battalion were basically between the logistical medical unit and the frontline combat troops. Although they were not as good as the top, they were not weaker than the bottom. In a sense, they were more important. The number of wounded soldiers at the front line increased. The transfer was disorderly. Sun Lan took the initiative to ask for help. When Sun Wen heard this, he felt gratified and a little melancholy at the same time. He was also a person who had experienced great storms. Naturally, he knew what kind of place the logistical medical unit was. It looked like it was at the rear, but the scene was no less than hell on earth. In the past, Sun Lan had not even seen a chicken being slaughtered. He did not know if he could bear to see it all of a sudden. Old Master Sun Wen valued his grandson too much, so he subconsciously treated Sun Lan as a child. He did not know that his grandson had already grown up. War was the best way to train people. At first, Sun Lan helped to command and dispatch. Later, when he saw that there were not enough people, he also helped to carry stretchers and wounded soldiers. He went back and forth dozens, hundreds of times. The clothes on his shoulders were torn by the hemp ropes. The flesh on his shoulders and palms were rubbed until there were bloody blisters. His originally clean clothes were also dyed red by the blood of the wounded soldiers. From afar he looked like a bloody man. There was more determination between his brows. How could one still see his past appearance? He happened to hear the news that the front line was about to retreat. He suddenly felt as if he was struck by lightning. It was as if his soul was about to leave his body. Grandfather Sun Wen was at the front line. How was he now? Grandfather? Sun Lan looked at the blazing flames on the horizon. His heart almost twisted into a ball. However, he had no time to inquire about his grandfather's news. He could only grit his teeth and suppress all his worries. The huge medical unit was full of wounded soldiers. Some were lucky enough to get stretchers or straw mats. Most of the soldiers could only lie on the ground. Those with less serious injuries leaned against each other to reduce the space they occupied. Because the female military doctors were short of manpower, the medical supplies were also somewhat stretched. Many soldiers only had time to hastily clean their wounds, stitch them up, and bandage them. The rest was up to fate. The seemingly crude medical methods were very comprehensive in this era. Overall, the death rate of the soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command was also the lowest in the same period. Listening to the cries of the wounded soldiers, Sun Lan took a deep breath. He suddenly had an unprecedented impulse. However, he quickly shook the thought out of his mind. Chapter 1537. There were many people in the Nye clan. The old master had given birth to 5 sons in one go, and the 5 sons had many children. By the time Nye Qing's father's generation had married and had children, the number of relatives Nye Qing had could be measured in hundreds, and he had more cousins than he could remember. Fortunately, Nye Qing did not have face blindness and had a good memory. Otherwise he wouldn't have remembered. This year at the clan gathering, Nye Qing followed behind his father, Nye Yang. His watery eyes couldn't help but look around. Nye Yang knew his son couldn't sit still. He smiled, "If it's boring, let the servant girls take you to the side to play with your brothers and sisters." Nye Qing blushed and lowered his head, not daring to look at his father's teasing expression. At that time, Nye Yang had yet to shine. He was like a luminous pearl, bright but not eye-catching. He didn't have a strong presence. This caused Nye Qing's status to be neither high nor low. Even so, the servant girls in the clan didn't dare to slight him and carefully served him. Nye Qing rested for a while in the side room. From the corner of his eyes, he saw a few children of the clan surrounding someone in the garden. "What are you doing?" Nye Qing was far away and couldn't hear what they were saying. But he could see the children shrunk their shoulders, their faces full of grievance. The group of young Langjun saw Nye Qing come over and immediately showed displeased expressions. "I'm just having a chat with my brothers." The one who said this was the tallest Langjun. Nye Qing recognized him. He was the eldest grandson of the Nye family's first branch. "So it's like this. I misunderstood. Please forgive me, cousin." As Nye Qing finished, he beckoned to the boy of the same age who was surrounded. "Come here, the elders are looking for you. The servant girls looked for you for a long time and thought you were lost. Come with me." The moment he said this, the eldest grandson's face darkened. But Nye Qing's expression was natural and he couldn't question him. He could only watch as Nye Qing took Nye Yang away. "Were they bullying you just now?" He had a good memory and faintly remembered that this harmless rabbit-like Langjun was his uncle's child. Nye Yang pinched his fingers and nodded. His eyes were still red, making him look even more like a rabbit. "Why did they bully you?" "Cousin's words don't make sense. I was bullied by those tall ones. Shouldn't you be asking me why? Why are you asking me instead?" Nye Yang pouted in dissatisfaction. Realizing that he had gone too far, he awkwardly corrected himself. This little brother didn't mean to talk back. It's just that things haven't been going well recently and they're very annoyed. This little brother. I hope cousin brother can forgive me." Nye Qing had a good temper, and he could also see that Nye Yang's situation was not very good, so naturally he would not vent his anger on him. "The reason why I'm asking you is because you're the only one beside me. If they're here, I'll go ask them." Nye Yang's face turned red in embarrassment. He felt apologetic for his antisocial behavior. "It's nothing much. When I was in the family school, they were criticized by the teacher for their homework. Little brother came in late, but he did better than them, so they were jealous." Nye Yang sighed and said in an old-fashioned tone, "Those who don't attract jealousy are mediocre. I won't argue with them." Nye Qing laughed heartily. It was his first time seeing such an interesting cousin. "Those who don't attract jealousy are mediocre." These words really make sense. Nye Yang continued, "Other than this, it probably has something to do with my looks. They always say that I look too much like a girl and am easy to bully." Even if he was a child from a landowning household, he was still a child. When it came to bullying others, any reason could be a reason. Nye Yang's father liked women, and he had children one after another. Although Nye Yang was the son of the first wife, he was not valued. For a child who was not valued even by his own father, how much support could he have in the complicated environment of the family school? As long as it wasn't a big deal, the headmaster wouldn't care if it was a small fight. Nye Qing laughed. "I see that you have a sharp tongue. You don't look like someone easy to bully." Nye Yang's eyes widened. He looked even more innocent and easy to bully. Nye Qing said, "I'll find a chance to talk to the family school's teacher. The family school is a place to study and not a place for a bunch of landowning households to bully the weak and fight. As for you, if you're wronged, you can tell me. I'll support you." Nye Yang did not expect that he could find a backer. But why? This was the first time he and Nye Qing had met. He was not used to the other party being so intimate right from the start. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Later, it was proven that Nye Qing's temperament was like this. It was a proper central air conditioner, but this one took special care of Nye Yang. "Thank you, big brother." Nye Yang was only half a year younger than Nye Qing, but the two of them were half a head apart. Nye Qing thought to himself, could it be that his uncle had deducted Nye Yang's rations, causing this younger cousin to be so skinny and small? No wonder he was bullied by others. Perhaps it was fate. Although the two of them were not blood-related brothers, they got along well. Not long after, they were like one person. Nye Yang's good days did not last long. He was secretly pushed into the pond and choked a few times. That night he caught a cold. When Nye Qing heard the news, he rushed over to see him. Yang was so sick that his entire face was red. "Big brother," Qing said, "what is it?" Yang stammered, "Last night when I fell into the water, I definitely did not slip in accidentally. Someone pushed me from behind." Qing said, "Big brother knows. I will definitely support you." Yang was sick, and the more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. He was not a good swimmer, and the pond was quite deep, not even above his head. Last night he really thought that he was going to drown. Why did these people bully him? Yang's eyes showed some confusion, but then they became determined. Because he had no power or influence, his father did not love him and his mother did not love him, he did not have the ability to protect himself, so they bullied him. Although Qing treated him well, he could not prevent him from being pushed into the pond and almost drowning. To put it bluntly, he still had to rely on himself to climb up until no one dared to bully him anymore. As he thought of this, a strange light laugh suddenly rang in his mind. "You are an interesting person. You have a high level of comprehension." Yang's body trembled, his face pale. He was so scared that his limbs turned cold. Even the thick bedding could not give him a sense of security. "Who are you?" "I am the system. You don't have to ask directly. Just ask in your heart." "I can hear you," the system said. "Just now you said that you want to rely on your own ability to climb up until no one dares to bully you, right? This goal is a little difficult to achieve." Yang said, "It has nothing to do with you. You demon, you are still pretending to be mysterious." "I do not need to pretend to be mysterious because I am a demon in the eyes of you mortals." The system laughed. "Your personality is very much in line with my criteria for choosing a host. Young man, if you only rely on yourself, you will have to suffer a lot in the future. Why don't you become my host? My power will be yours to use. To tell you the truth, I am the Emperor growth system. My hosts are all people with Emperor's Qi and have the potential to rule the world. Within the borders of Zhongzhou, your Emperor's Qi is the thickest. It can be seen that the heavens intend for you to stand out in this chaotic world." "Nonsense. The world is at peace now. How can there be chaos?" "If the host does not believe me, just wait and see." Chapter 1538. Although they were prepared to retreat from Secondary Path City, they were not retreating mindlessly. Qiguanrang knew this very well. They had to plan it slowly and act slowly. They had to let the enemy not notice and let their own soldiers know that retreat was not a route but a strategic arrangement. Because they were cautious enough, the Nye army did not suspect anything. What's the situation at the front? Wei Yong was always paying attention to the battle. Seeing the tragic situation, even he could not help but frown, leaving a mark between his brows. He had thought that attacking Zhangjiang Pass tonight would give them an advantage and convenience, but he did not expect the enemy to be so stubborn. If the two armies continued to be in a stalemate, the losses on both sides would multiply. The enemy is already showing signs of defeat. They will most likely not be able to hold on. The general's serious face finally showed some joy, and his tone became lighter. The resistance now is not as strong as at the beginning, and their morale is getting lower. They will be defeated sooner or later. Wei Yong pinched his brows, and his tightly pursed lips almost became a straight line. Those who were not familiar with him knew that he was in a bad mood. The general asked him fearfully, "Military advisor, is there anything wrong?" Wei Yong said coldly, "Our army had the advantage of a sneak attack, and it took a long time for the enemy to show signs of defeat. What is there to be happy about?" After hearing this, the general was embarrassed. However, he was dark and the night was dark, so others could not see it. "I was wrong." Wei Yong changed the topic. "Lu Shi is our strong enemy, so it is expected that he has such strength." How to show his strength? Naturally, it was to be stronger than a strong enemy. If Zhangjiang Pass was as weak as paper, the late Lord Nyelyang would not have died in peace. The Nye army at the foot of the city persevered in setting up ladders on the city wall. The catapult constantly used burning fireballs to attack the enemy behind the wall, and at the same time, provided cover for the soldiers climbing the ladders. At the same time, the soldiers at the city gate also carried heavy battering rams against the city gate. Their cheeks were red and they gritted their teeth. The veins on their foreheads were bulging, and their clothes were drenched in sweat. They shouted a battle cry and exerted force at the same time. Even though Zhangjiang Pass's gate was sturdy, it was now cracked. Seeing the crack, everyone was greatly encouraged, as if victory was right in front of them. They worked even harder. When the sound of the crack on the city gate expanding reached his ears, it was like the sound of nature. With a loud bang, the city gate was completely blasted open. Through the crack, everyone could see the rocks blocking the entrance of the city, and they were almost dumbfounded. It would take time to clear the rocks, and the number of soldiers climbing the ladders was limited, so they could not pose much of a threat. Chiguanrang gave the order to retreat to Erdeo City. With the obstruction of the city walls and the holes in the city, there were not many pursuers. Naturally, there were not many casualties. The general of the Nya army passed on the news to Wei Yong. Wei Yong's expression did not change, as if he had already expected this. It doesn't matter. Let's clear the rocks and rest for a while before chasing after them. The general was dissatisfied. Our army's morale is at its peak. At this time we should completely defeat the enemy in one go. Wei Yong said coldly, the city's tunnels have been completely sealed off by the enemy. May I ask how the general is going to dispatch a large number of elites and supplies to kill the enemy in such a short time? He was afraid that he would be killed by the enemy as soon as he caught up. Sharpening the knife will not delay the work of cutting firewood. Don't tell me that general doesn't even understand this common sense? For them to be able to pry open the gates of Zhanjiang Pass, didn't they rely on the support of military supplies and their advantage in numbers? In terms of the quality of their soldiers, they did not have an advantage. Using one's weakness to attack the enemy's strength, water must have gotten into their brains. But the general did not agree with Wei Yong's opinion. When Ye Liang was still alive, he had not liked Wei Yong very much. He admitted that Wei Yong was outstanding. If he did not have any ability, Ye Liang would not have thought so highly of him. However, there was a good saying, man proposes but God disposes. So what if this group of strategists had the ability to scheme and scheme? There was a large discrepancy between actual operations and theoretical assumptions. Marching and fighting a war could not be done by relying on armchair strategies. They had to take into account the changes on the battlefield and make targeted adjustments at the right time. Wei Yong was afraid of the slightest thing in battle. He felt angry just looking at him. Now he had even pushed away a great opportunity. What did he want? Thinking of this, the general felt even more depressed. Wei Yong was a strategist. It was enough that he was responsible for planning, but he was interfering with the general's work. Many of Nye Liang's old officials felt that Wei Yong wanted to monopolize power and make the new Lord Nye Qing a figurehead. The general did not think so at first, but seeing Wei Yong's current actions, he could not help but waver. He said, the enemy has been routed and the army's morale is in chaos. This general thinks that we should follow up our victory and pursue them, not giving them any chance to breathe. The strategist thinks too much. Instead, he attends to one thing and loses sight of another, delaying the opportunity. When it comes to marching and fighting a war, this general boasts that he is not much worse than the strategist. Wei Yong could not help but sneer. He said, General, do you think that the elites under Liu Shi's command will be routed so easily? Nye Liang had led the troops to feign an attack on Zhanjiang Pass. Although not all the elites had been dispatched, it had been a difficult battle. The previous lord had always taken the enemy seriously. After this battle he was even more alert. That was a true elite force, not a grassroots team. They would not collapse after a single defeat. This person in front of him was too inexperienced. Did he really think that Jiang Pingji was an enemy that he had fought before? The general said angrily, Strategist, don't diminish your own prestige and boost the morale of others. Wei Yong's eyes turned cold. He said coldly, does the general want to disobey military orders? The general was also loyal to the Nye family, but he had his own thoughts. He disapproved of Wei Yong's actions. He said, Strategist, don't forget that in terms of responsibilities, you are in charge of the civil and I am in charge of the military. Although the strategist can intervene in the matter of deploying troops, it is not something that you can decide on your own. As a strategist, Wei Yong had a certain amount of military power, but when it came to truly haggling, he was still a civilian and could not suppress the other. If Fan Qin or the young master Nye Qing were here, he naturally would not be afraid. If he was alone, it would be somewhat troublesome. If the general insists on doing so, I have nothing to say. I only have one thing to say. If we lead the troops to pursue and cause the battle to fail, will the general be willing to take responsibility? The general snorted and said heroically, I will be punished according to military law. I will not have any resentment. With that, he flipped over and mounted his horse. Wei Yong looked at him with a headache. He could not deny the general's loyalty to the Nye family, but the two of them had different opinions. It was inevitable that the conflict would increase. Seeing this, the generals on Wei Yong's side were extremely worried. Strategist, what should we do now? We can't really ask the general to walk into the enemy's trap, right? The military strategist's talent was repeatedly affirmed by the previous Lord Nye Liang. The enemy was also so cunning. It was definitely not wrong to be more cautious. Wei Yong said coldly, "It doesn't matter. Anyway, we won't lose many people. Let him suffer." Chapter 1539. The Deputy General could not bear it, but there was nothing he could do. Wei Yong said, "If we don't make him give up, there will be more conflicts in the future. It's better to take the opportunity to break his spirit and make him more clear-headed." "But if that's the case, our army will definitely suffer losses," Wei Yong said coldly. "Do you think losing hundreds or thousands of people this time will teach him a lesson, or losing tens of thousands of the entire army next time?" The Deputy General understood these principles, but Wei Yong's decisive and calm approach still made him feel uncomfortable. Sigh, if only the late Lord Nyelyang was still here, this kind of thing would not have happened. Although everyone had conflicts, they did not dare to bring their personal grievances to the surface. Now that the situation was like this, they wondered if the late Lord would be angry if he knew. Most likely he would. When the late Lord was still here, when was the military advisor Wei Yong ever questioned like this and even used his power to oppress others? The Deputy General said, "What if the general still stubbornly refuses to repent and instead holds a grudge against the military advisor?" Wei Yong said, "Although that person is bossy and willful, he is not an unreasonable person. Give him a lesson and he will listen to you." Some people were just stubborn. If they did not throw the truth in the other party's face, they would stubbornly walk a dark path to the end. Reality proved that some people needed to be taught a lesson. They would only know that they were wrong when they were slapped in the face. Although Qiguanrang and the others had retreated, there were no signs of defeat. Their retreat was also orderly. Whether it was advancing or retreating, they were at ease. The general sent troops to chase after them. They ate as many as they sent. They killed thousands of enemies one after another, and the army's morale was greatly boosted. "Tiske, I heard Zixiao say that Wei Yong was a very cautious person and would not easily take the bait. Why is he so reckless now?" Qiguanrang knew that Wei Yong would not immediately send troops to chase after them, so he was very relaxed when he retreated. He never expected that he would miscalculate. If not for the fact that the city entrance was still blocked, the enemy could only climb the ladder to the city wall. How could there be so few enemies chasing after them? Wei Yong underestimated us. He dared to chase after us with so few pursuers. Did he really think that our army would be defeated so badly after retreating? If the army completely lost the will to fight, thousands of pursuers could indeed kill them. For example, his lord had fought in front of the battlefield and became famous in one battle. The arrival of the miracle had shocked the enemy and destroyed their remaining fighting spirit. This kind of enemy was either so stupid that they didn't even dare to run, or they only cared about running and didn't know how to resist. Thieves were easy to kill. However, when Qiguanrang examined himself, he did not think that he met the above criteria. "Counselor, maybe he's just being careless." The young general who was guarding Qiguanrang interrupted with a smile. Qiguanrang frowned slightly. "It's not to the extent of being careless. Do you think our military counselor Wei Zixiao will get carried away and become careless? As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Wei Ci valued his eldest brother Wei Qiu so much, the latter must have something special about him and would not make mistakes easily, let alone such a low-level mistake." Qiguanrang was more inclined to the other theory than being careless. Their old lord, Nyelyang, has passed away, and the new lord, Nyeching, has returned to Zhongzhou. "Without a leader at the front line, I'm afraid?" the young general asked curiously. "Afraid of what?" Qiguanrang smiled and said, "I'm afraid that someone has a disagreement with Wei Qiu and is in conflict." The young general said, "I heard that Wei Qiu's position in the Nya army is not low and he has military power in his hands. Who can overpower him?" Qiguanrang said, "Why not? Wei Qiu has military power, but he doesn't have a monopoly." The young general said proudly, "These things will not happen in the Lord's hands. The Lord has a strong temperament and acts fairly. It is indeed not easy to happen, but nothing is absolute." Qiguanrang knew very well that it was not that there were no conflicts in his lord's camp, but that she did not bring them to the surface. If there were conflicts of interest and standpoints in the future, they would probably fight more fiercely than he imagined. If the Lord did not reveal everything to him, he was afraid that he would always be on guard against Wei Ci and only plan to get rid of him when necessary. So what if Wei Ci was the Lord's man? When it came to politics, this identity would only hasten Wei Ci's death. Qiguanrang would not be merciful just because Wei Ci was the Lord's man. At most, he would let Wei Ci die with dignity and leave his corpse intact. The young general asked curiously, "Is there a conflict?" This general's eyesight is poor, so I did not notice that the generals and the military counselor are getting along very well. Chiguanrang was speechless. How did the conflict disappear? The conflict between the gentry and the poor was a conflict that could not be ignored. There were not many gentry in the Lord's camp, but it was not that there were none. When the world was slightly more stable and there were many things waiting to be done, it was inevitable that the gentry would be put to good use. Who asked the gentry to have so many gentry? The foundation of the poor was still too shallow. In the beginning, they could still fight evenly with the gentry by relying on their achievements in founding the country. As time went on, the disadvantage of the poor with a shallow foundation became more obvious. They would either be assimilated by the gentry and become a new gentry, or they would fall and never have a chance to make a comeback. For the gentry to survive for so many years, their means of survival were not comparable to those of the poor. He was deep in thought. The young general smiled and said, "The Lord is so wise. Even if there is a conflict, she will nip it in the bud." Chiguanrang could not help but laugh. His Lord was really deified. Yes, the Lord is the child of providence. There is nothing she can't do. Wei Xi's brainwashing was really scary. A good seedling had been brainwashed into a brainless fanboy. General Nie Jun caught up and found that the enemy had retreated calmly and did not look as pathetic as he had imagined. His face immediately burned. Not only was he ashamed, but he was also angry at being played by the enemy. "You brats, such despicable behavior is really infuriating." The general was a person who cared about his reputation. He had just dissed Wei Yong without thinking, and now he was slapped in the face by the enemy. When Wei Yong caught up with the soldiers, he did not dare to look at the other party's face. Fortunately, Wei Yong was magnanimous and did not deliberately use this to humiliate him. The two of them tacitly brushed this matter aside. Wei Yong said, "Retreat 1 kilometer with the troops first. We will attack when the supplies are ready." The general subconsciously wanted to refute, but he had learned his lesson and did not want to be slapped in the face again in such a short time. "We will listen to the military counselor's arrangements." Many soldiers did not understand Wei Yong's decision to retreat 2 kilometers. They had won a small battle. Why should they give up the fat meat in their mouths and choose to retreat? This was a classic case of information stagnation. The people below did not understand the orders of their superiors. Some would blindly follow, but there were also people who were confused and even misunderstood. Why are they retreating? Retreating to Erdeo City, they could not help but feel puzzled when they saw the enemy retreat. Chiguanrang smiled and said, "Of course they have to retreat. Why don't we wait for our army to send out troops?" The enemy's supplies did not keep up. At this time they had to retreat and stabilize the situation. If they continued to wait, they would capsize. Old Master Sun Wen's face was cold as he asked Chiguanrang, "Is it possible now?" Chapter 1540. There was also a need to pay attention to the timing of the attack. If it was too early, it would not be enough, and if it was too late, it would be easy to lose the best opportunity. Chiguanrang was experienced and could control the timing, not to mention that he had Wei Ci and Old Man Sun Wen by his side. Be vigilant, the enemy is most likely going to attack. Wei Yong's face was solemn. "Counselor, you said, they will attack now?" The general was shocked at first, but he quickly understood. He grasped the weapon in his hand tightly and said in a thunderous voice, "Counselor, don't worry. If they dare to attack, we will make sure that they do not return." Wei Yong said, "Of course they will attack. Otherwise, when our supplies are in place, they will not be able to defend themselves and their morale will collapse." A retreat could appease the soldiers and ensure that their morale would not be broken and their formation would not be disrupted. If there was another retreat, they would be in a passive position. Wei Yong had reason to believe that this was Chiguanrang's last chance to attack. As expected, there was movement in Erdeo City. Several city gates opened and soldiers poured out like a tide. The cavalry and chariots were at the forefront. They were extremely fast and closed the distance between them in no time. It looked like they were about to charge. Wei Yong ordered the archers to face the enemy and set up the barricade posts to obstruct the enemy cavalry's attack as much as possible. Then he ordered the archers to attack with arrows. The cavalry had always been a headache for the feudal lords, not to mention that Jiang Pingji had both heavy and light cavalry. Both had their own strengths and were difficult to coordinate. The heavy cavalry collided and cut the formation while the light cavalry used their speed to outflank the enemy. It was an invincible combination. Although the barricade posts could cause some trouble for the cavalry, they were not fatal. Jiang Pingji's heavy cavalry used heavy horses. Both the men and horses were covered in heavy armor. The craftsmanship of the armor had been improved by her several times. There was almost no weakness on the armor. The joints were hidden and the armor was as thick as half a knuckle. Unless the enemy archers had superb archery skills and could aim at the eyes of the men or horses from a long distance, it was difficult to cause fatal damage to them. The armor was either bronze or refined iron. How could ordinary arrows break through such heavy defense? In Jiang Pingji's words, the heavy cavalry were a group of iron turtles. They had no other shortcomings except for their slow speed. When thousands of heavy cavalry charged together, they could even send the barricade posts flying. However, the heavy cavalry also had obvious weaknesses. Their durability was extremely poor, their endurance was worrying, and their speed was also slow. If he was entangled by the enemy, he would be like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. On the other hand, light cavalry sacrificed their defense in exchange for speed. They came and went like the wind, and their mobility was the best-known troop type. Wei Yong had investigated Jiang Pingji, so he naturally knew about the trump card troops under her command. Seeing that even the light and heavy cavalry had come out, he knew that Qiguan Rang and the others intended to have a showdown with him. Therefore he did not dare to act rashly. He was in charge of dispatching and commanding, but the battlefield was ever-changing. Many times, it still depended on the performance of the commander. Seeing that the heavy cavalry was armed to the teeth, General Nye immediately changed tactics. Chop the horse's legs and poke the horse's eyes. The general was experienced in dealing with cavalrymen. Cavalrymen were scary, but as long as they couldn't charge or move after entering the formation, they wouldn't be much of a threat. Lasso, remember to aim at the arms and heads of the enemy cavalrymen. The heavy cavalry on horseback was terrifying, but those who were dragged off horseback were not so great. Wearing such heavy armor to fight, just the armor alone would consume most of their strength. Once the heavy cavalry fell off their horses, they would lose their advantage in speed and strength, making it even easier for them to die. Of course, this was a theoretical tactic. There was always a huge gap between actual operation and theoretical knowledge. The enemy heavy cavalry did not fight alone, but in groups. The heavy cavalry, together with their horses, weighed about 800 to 1,000 kilograms, while the Asian elephants weighed only 3 to 5 tons. The heavy cavalry launched an attack at the same time, ignoring the enemy's defensive posts and charging into the enemy's formation against the rain of arrows. How could a few dozen soldiers stop them? They crossed the defensive posts and charged into the crowd. The unlucky guy who bore the brunt of the impact had his sternum broken, his head split open, and he could not be more dead. The Zamedeo in the hands of the heavy cavalry was also specially made. The blade was wide, the handle was extremely long, and the blade was sharp. Chopping off a person's head was like cutting tofu. More than 1,000 heavy cavalry seemed to have barged into no man's land. They ignored the drizzle of obstacles along the way. The heavy cavalry's performance was so outstanding, the light cavalry was not willing to fall behind. The most annoying thing about cavalry, especially light cavalry, was that they would attack when they wanted to, but by the time you wanted to retaliate they had already run far away. How could a two-legged person compare to a four-legged horse? Moreover, it was a fast-moving live target that was difficult to aim at. Archery was not so easy to practice. Those godly archers who could shoot with 100% accuracy could not be ordinary archers their entire lives. Most of the time, the role of an archer was to shoot arrows in the direction of the enemy and cause indiscriminate damage through a large area of arrow rain. If one arrow could not hit its target, then a few more would be shot. A blind cat could always find a dead mouse, and the arrows that were shot could also hit the enemy. Qiguan Rang sent the heavy cavalry to lead the attack, not to use them as cannon fodder to fight the enemy. They were the most valuable troops under the Lord's command. Men could eat, but horses could eat even more. Every qualified cavalry battalion soldier was built with money and rice. The main purpose of the cavalry going into battle was to use them to oppress the enemy in terms of momentum and force them into confusion. At the same time, it was to buy time for the follow-up troops. To make the enemy unable to stabilize their position and delay the main force until the main force rushed over. However, they did not only have cavalry. The Nye family was even wealthier than Jiang Pingji. The scale of the cavalry that they trained was not small. Qiguan Rang saw that the enemy had stabilized their position and began to counterattack. He immediately ordered the cavalry to return to the formation to reduce losses as much as possible. The light cavalry stood guard and obstructed the enemy's pursuit. The heavy cavalry was responsible for covering the return of the formation. It would be heartbreaking to lose even a few of these gold ingots. Kill. Wei Yong saw the situation and his expression was extremely cold. At this point in the fierce battle, the sky slowly turned white. The two armies fought for a whole night, but both sides were in high spirits. As soon as the battle began, they were inseparable and fought to the death. The Nya army's morale was high because of a small victory. Jiang Pingji's troops were full of confidence. They killed until their eyes were red. At the same time, Jiang Pingji and the rest led the remaining troops to a draw with the troops led by Fan Chen. Fan Chen's troops were originally 2 times larger than theirs, but now they were tied by her. Jiang Pingji spat out a mouthful of blood and revealed a sinister smile. It was a really satisfying night of killing. In front of her were enemies and there were heads everywhere. Most importantly, no one could beat her in killing them. I haven't killed to my heart's content in a long time. Bai Ning was also old and seriously injured. After staying up all night, he showed signs of fatigue. Hearing his lord's words, he could not help but smile bitterly. If he counted the corpses on the battlefield, he was afraid that 1/3 of them had died in the hands of his lord. No one survived under the god-slaying sword. Those who were slashed by her would die. Every slash was aimed at the enemy's vital parts. Chapter 1541. Bai Ning lamented, "Isn't it a nightmare to fight an entire army alone?" In this battle, they suffered heavy losses at the beginning, but their subsequent losses were not significant. The enemy was the opposite of them. They had the upper hand in the early stages, but they were defeated by their own army in the middle and later stages. No matter how Fan Chen used violence to suppress the fluctuating morale of the army, the Nya army still collapsed. He had never expected that the person who had turned the situation around was actually his lord. She had relied on violent means to forcefully beat the arrogant enemy to the ground. Initially, the enemy outnumbered them, but the lord led the soldiers to cut down the numbers on both sides. There was actually such a thing in the world. Qin Gong muttered, "An ordinary person's arm would be crippled after wielding a sword for a whole night. On the other hand, my lord is still full of energy." Bai Ning echoed, "She's inhuman." At that moment, they even suspected that their lord was a deity who had descended to the mortal world to play with mortals like them. Little did they know that their lord, whom they praised to the heavens, was being lectured by the old chief, who had just returned to sleep. Jiang Pingji was extremely depressed. The old chief could go back to sleep happily, but she had been fighting and killing the enemy the whole night. Even if she didn't get any credit, she had worked hard. Couldn't the old leader be merciful and give her some face? "You Abba, there's really something wrong with your mentality. As the saying goes, a higher-ranking official can crush a person to death." The old chief was not only Jiang Pingji's former superior, but he had also guided and taught her. Even though she was very depressed, Jiang Pingji could only listen obediently on the surface. She yawned as she listened. "You Abba, do you really think you've completed the mission given by the Federation by killing the Skybrain? Can you just retire after accomplishing your mission?" Jiang Pingji felt a headache when she heard that. She said, "What exactly are you referring to, old chief? My mentality is very normal." She really didn't know what was wrong with her, but bystanders could see things clearly. Perhaps the old chief really saw something, so she listened attentively. "You Abba, you've long suspected that there was something wrong, but why did you still fall into the enemy's ambush?" Jiang Pingji sneered. "Didn't the old chief say that if you pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger for too long, you'll be assimilated? Remember not to make the same mistake next time." After she said that, the old chief was silent for a long time. After a while, he sent a long message to Jiang Pingji. "Your Abba, that's part of the reason, but isn't the other reason that you're in a hurry?" Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. What did she mean by anxious for quick results? She looked very anxious. "Old chief, you're wrong to say that. When have I ever been impatient for success? If I was really in a hurry, I would have pestered you to mail me mecha, battleships, or other firearms. It's not easy to dominate the world. Let's take a step back and say that I can use my own abilities if things don't work out, but I don't have any. How can you say that I'm anxious for quick results?" Jiang Pingji felt wronged. The old chief's accusation was groundless. "Your Abba, you said no? Aren't you in a hurry to attack the city and settle the matter in front of you so that you can return to the Federation? For the sake of this goal, your mentality has changed. You are far less serious than before. To put it bluntly, you have even lost the basic respect for life. You knew that something was wrong. You knew that the spiritual realm could help you investigate the enemy's situation and avoid harm, but you never thought about this. Rather than saying that you were assimilated and forgot about this ability, it's more accurate to say that you subconsciously did not intend to use it." The more Jiang Pingji listened, the more she frowned. To outsiders, she looked like she was wiping the blood off the god-slaying sword. Old chief, if you have something to say, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush? Your Abba, are the lives of the soldiers under your command important to you? She was a genetic warrior. The education she received from a young age was to sacrifice everything for the overall situation, including her own life. Jiang Pingji could even sacrifice her own life. What else could she not give up? In order to achieve her goal, it was normal to sacrifice the lives of the soldiers under her command. However, Jiang Pingji said, "Of course it's important. Your Abba, did you really not know that the enemy had set up an ambush, or did you take the bait even though you knew there was an ambush?" Jiang Pingji's lips curled into a cold smile. What's the difference? Your Abba, whether it's an ambush or not, you have to take the bait. Therefore, of course, you don't need to use your spiritual realm to investigate the enemy. You don't need to. Isn't it to prevent yourself from knowing the truth and alerting the enemy? You used yourself and the soldiers under your command as bait to lure the enemy. Aren't you afraid that you'll capsize if you're careless? In your plan, how many people do you plan to sacrifice to achieve this? Jiang Pingji blinked and smiled. I don't understand what you mean, old chief. Your Abba, you want to wipe out the Nye family's troops, don't you? Jiang Pingji said, I've stayed here long enough. Isn't it better to get rid of the Nye family and end the war as soon as possible? Your Abba, you finally admit it. Jiang Pingji did not comment. Not only was Wei Yong plotting against her, but she was also playing along. If Wei Yong's retreat was true, it would be best. The troops sent out could ambush the Nye camp. It would be considered a victory. If Wei Yong's retreat was a trap, what could it be? Jiang Pingji put herself in Wei Yong's shoes and roughly guessed the enemy's plan. It was no exception. They would set up an ambush to kill the troops that ambushed the Nye camp. What's more, they would arrange for an ambush to ambush Zhanjiang Pass. If they ambushed Zhanjiang Pass, Wei Yong would definitely go all out and send out all his troops. Jiang Pingji weighed the two options. Her brows had never relaxed. In the end, she decided to beat them at their own game. Regardless of whether the enemy was acting or not, she would find out after a while. She did not use her spiritual realm to investigate. Just as the old chief said, she did not think of it. Secondly, she did not plan to use it. Whether it was the enemy's scheme or not, it was all within her calculations. Except for a few people, Qin Gong and Bai Ning did not know about this plan. A secret was a secret because few people knew about it. The fewer people who knew about it, the smaller the loopholes. She could protect the lives of the two of them, but she could not guarantee the survival of the other soldiers. The old chief was angry and reprimanded her, mostly because of this. In order to achieve her goal, Jiang Pingji pushed the soldiers who did not know about it to their deaths. Old chief, I've never been a good person. The rule of genetic warriors is to achieve their goals by hook or by crook. Necessary sacrifices are inevitable. Jiang Pingji said calmly, on the whole, the Nye family has been destroyed. Our army's overall losses are smaller. If the Nye family was allowed to jump around, the two armies would fight one battle after another. The accumulated losses would be too great. It was better to gather the troops and set up a dead end for them. They would suffer a heavy setback and suffer a great loss. Even though, this plan would sacrifice some innocent soldiers. Your Abba, if it were the federal soldiers, would you sacrifice them without hesitation? Chapter 1542. My lord, the enemy has fled. Should we chase after them or rescue Zhanjiang Pass? Qin Gong wiped the blood off his face and revealed a carefree expression. The battle tonight was really satisfying. Jiang Pingji looked at Zhanjiang Pass from afar. Her eyes were as deep and dark as a deep pool, containing a coldness that outsiders could not perceive. Capture the remaining soldiers. The battle at Zhanjiang Pass is probably over. Qin Gong was stunned. He did not seem to understand what Jiang Pingji meant. What did she mean by, the battle at Zhanjiang Pass is probably over? Would our army or the enemy be victorious? He had looked in the direction of Zhanjiang Pass earlier. The flames there soared into the sky and dyed the pitch-black sky red. It was obvious how intense the battle was. If the enemy came out in full force, Zhanjiang Pass would most likely be routed thousands of miles away when it was undefended. However, his lord looked as if she had a well-thought-out plan. Could it be that there was something else going on? Jiang Pingji interrupted his speculation. Why are you in a daze? Qin Gong said, I'm just curious. If the enemy comes out in full force, it seems impossible to defend Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji said, why not? Do you know what it means to wait for a hare by a stump and catch a turtle in a jar? Qin Gong said, although I'm not as knowledgeable as you, I understand the meaning of the words. My lord, do you mean that the Nye army failed to sneak attack Zhanjiang Pass and instead fell into our army's counterattack? That's not right. Our troops are all guarding the pass. How can we have extra troops to carry out an ambush? You're half right, Jiang Pingji said. Besides, who told you that the remaining troops of our army are guarding the pass? If one was attentive, he or she would probably discover a very strange thing. The troops that Jiang Pingji brought to guard the pass were about tens of thousands of troops of the Nye army. Tonight, the troops that attacked Jiang Pingji were twice as many as hers. The troops guarding Zhanjiang Pass were also much fewer than the Nye army. So the question was, where did the troops that had disappeared under Jiang Pingji's command go? Qin Gong did not turn around for a while. Jiang Pingji's indifferent face revealed a slight smile. At that moment, she saw the old chief send her a message from the corner of her eye. Your Abba, I can't comment on whether your behavior is right or wrong. I just hope that you can stay true to yourself. Also, there's something I forgot to tell you. It's because your genes awakened much earlier than I expected. There was a flaw in the ancestral atavism gene of the Jiang clan's ancestor. To be more specific, it would affect one's temperament, causing one to be easily angered and unable to control the killing intent and dark emotions in one's heart. Jiang Pingji said, does the old chief think that my decision to sacrifice the troops and horses was influenced by the awakening? Your Abba. No, I'm reminding you not to let the sky brain take advantage of me. I don't want to kill my successor with my own hands. Jiang Pingji frowned slightly. The old chief's words had a deeper meaning. I'm not a 3-year-old kid. How could I be bewitched by him? Your Abba, nothing is absolute. The Jiangs were so prosperous hundreds of years ago. They had so many talents in the family, but they were still killed. No matter how capable Jiang Pingji was, could she be stronger than those geniuses? Even other people had fallen into the trap of the sky's brain, let alone Jiang Pingji, who was just a little girl in her early 50s. Jiang Pingji rubbed the space between her eyebrows and promised, I'll be careful. Your Abba, you don't have to worry too much about the sequelae of the awakening of the ancient bloodline. Your mind is very stable. You won't be as unlucky as your ancestors. Your current task is to manage your lousy farm well. You've been here for 10 years. Do you still have 3 to 5 years left? Jiang Pingji smiled bitterly to herself. The old chief said it lightly, but she wasn't herself. Jiang Pingji had been in this backward and ignorant era for too long. She originally thought that she would not be able to return to the Federation, so she gave up and managed everything she had. Unexpectedly, the old chief appeared and told her that it was probably a trap set against the sky's brain. At the same time, he tested her to see if she had the qualifications to become a marshal. Jiang Pingji could return to her own era. Why would she waste time and energy in an unfamiliar place? As time went by, such thoughts became clearer and clearer. It affected her mentality more or less. However, no matter what, she did not regret the plan this time. If there was anything she regretted, it was probably that she regretted hiding it from Qin Gong, Bai Ning, and the troops. They unknowingly stepped into the enemy's trap and caused additional casualties. She did not regret anything else. It was fine as long as she had a clear conscience. If she was given another chance, she would do the same thing again. She did not regret sacrificing a small number of people for the sake of overall victory. Jiang Pingji suddenly missed the fruit candy that she loved to eat when she was young. She wanted to return to the Federation, even if it was a place full of danger. 3 to 5 years? Does the old chief mean that when the world is unified, you plan to come and help me share this mess? You Abba? Humph, I didn't say anything. Jiang Pingji smiled and teased, Old chief, call me Anyang in advance. You Abba, get lost. Jiang Pingji scratched her head. A huge stone was lifted from her heart. She was really worried that she would waste the rest of her life in this world. If the old chief came to take over, she would not even need to give birth to an heir. Saves trouble. Jiang Pingji sighed with emotion. Qin Gong asked in surprise, What do you mean saves trouble, my lord? Jiang Pingji said, What do you mean by saves trouble in the future? I don't even need to teach her. If she can crawl, I can be exploited as a child laborer. Qin Gong suddenly widened his eyes. He could not help but glance at Jiang Pingji's lower abdomen. My lord, has a young master? Then why did she kill so fiercely before? My lord, should I call for a military doctor to take a look at you? Young master, the baby that the military counselors have been looking forward to for almost 10 years is finally coming? Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes at him and said angrily, What are you looking at? I'm fine. I'll clear the thoughts out of your head. Did he really think that she could not see what was going on in his head? At the same time, the situation at Zhanjiang Pass was progressing as Jiang Pingji had expected. Qiguan Rang seized the opportunity to send troops to attack and disrupt the Nye army's formation. The two armies were in a chaotic battle. War cries could be heard everywhere. From time to time, the screams of soldiers who were hit by the fireballs from the catapults could be heard. Qiguan Rang's cold eyes stared at the back of the Nye army, as if he was waiting for something. Reporting military counselor, the orderly was covered in blood. A large piece of skin on his forehead had been sliced off by the enemy's sharp weapon. He looked extremely terrifying. But he seemed to be unaware of it. He reported the changes on the battlefield clearly. The enemy's attack is swift and violent. I'm afraid our army will be defeated. Fear was like a snowball rolling bigger and bigger. The defending troops at Zhanjiang Pass had been defeated by the enemy on the battlefield. They might not be able to make a comeback. Qiguan Rang looked up at the horizon and said, "It's time. Someone send the signal." The guard who had been following Qiguan Rang stepped out and said, "Yes, sir." As he finished speaking, he took out a thick and strange bamboo tube from his waist and carefully lit it to light the fire. Squeak, a sharp whistling sound was heard. The bamboo tube shot out a beam of red light. It rose to the highest point and suddenly exploded. Qiguan Rang looked at the Nye family who were fighting fiercely under Erdeo City and suddenly smiled coldly. Chapter 1543. The sounds of killing covered the sharp whistling of the fireworks. However, when it bloomed, it still attracted the gazes of many people. Wei Yong was one of them. Looking at the dazzling red fireworks, an ominous feeling filled his heart. "Guangshan, we will win, right?" Wei Yong looked at the fireworks disappearing into the horizon and muttered. Apart from himself, no one else heard him. Despite having an ominous feeling, Wei Yong did not give the order to retreat or do anything else. What a joke. At this moment, the two armies were in a stalemate, and it was impossible for them to back down. Whoever showed signs of weakness would lose. Wei Yong suppressed the worry in his heart. He stared at the changes in the battle while ordering the soldiers to be on high alert to prevent any possible sneak attacks. Unfortunately, Wei Yong did not know that there was a psychological thing called the Murphy effect. The more one did not want something to happen, the more likely it would happen. In less than a quarter of an hour, a blood-soaked messenger suddenly rushed over and shouted at the top of his lungs, reporting. Wei Yong's heart beat even faster. He asked, "What's the matter?" The soldier said, "Tens of thousands of enemy troops suddenly appeared behind us." "Behind us?" Wei Yong's heart beat even faster. He turned his head to look in the direction of Zhanjiang Pass that they had broken through not long ago. A large number of enemy troops had indeed appeared there and were sneak attacking the weakly defended rear. The enemy's attacks were swift and fierce in front, and there were jackals staring at them from behind. The Nye army was actually surrounded. There were only a few exits in Zhanjiang Pass. In other words, the Nye army had no way to retreat. The enemy's appearance was quite clever. Not only did they attack from the front and back, they also used violence to break up the Nye army's formation, causing the army to fall into chaos. Seeing this, Wei Yong could not help but clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. He clenched his teeth and trembled because of his intense emotions. The Nye army focused on attacking the enemy in front of him. As the two armies were in a stalemate, he did not suspect that the enemy had the strength to split up and ambush them. Who would have thought that the enemy would be so ruthless and patient, not revealing this trump card even when Zhanjiang Pass was about to be breached? Instead, they had to lure the Nye army into Zhanjiang Pass and only use this trump card after the two armies fought? Wei Yong was thoroughly convinced by his forbearance. Even though they were pincered by the enemy and the Nye army was in disarray, Wei Yong did not give up. He tried to lead the troops to break out of the encirclement, but Qiguan Rang and the others were determined to keep the Nye army here, not giving them a way out. This slaughter continued from dawn till dusk. Only then did it stop. After a fierce battle, nearly 200,000 Nye soldiers were defeated. In the end, only 20 to 30,000 of them managed to escape. The remaining soldiers were unlucky. When they retreated, they bumped into Jiang Pingji, who was leading the troops back. Once again they were ruthlessly attacked. When Jiang Pingji returned with her troops, the 5 million idlers in the streaming room were still laughing, but they soon stopped laughing. Zhanjiang Pass was covered in blood. The originally majestic city walls were now full of holes. Every inch of the walls was soaked in the blood of both sides. Jiang Pingji acted as if she didn't see any of this. She rode her horse through the city entrance and entered Zhanjiang Pass. Drip, drip. The salted fishes were shocked to find that there was scarlet blood in the potholes on the ground. Big White's hooves would always splash blood when they stepped into the shallow potholes. Tudufecio, Streamer, was it raining last night? Kazigio Chifan, it doesn't look like it was raining, the salted fishes spoke cautiously. Some of the more sensitive ones found that there was something wrong with the streamer that day. This kind of abnormality made them explode with a desire to live from heaven. All of them kept quiet out of fear. For example, it was probably low air pressure. Just looking at her made one feel a sense of heaviness. It made one's heart feel stuffy, and even breathing felt laborious. Guikai Guofengxio, how is it raining? It's obviously blood. What happened at Zhanjiang Pass last night? Why is there so much blood? Did the Nya army sneak attack again? Streamer, you're not being honest. You should have started streaming last night. It's a pity that you missed it. The salted fishes complained. This was not the first time that Jiang Pingji had secretly eaten alone. In the past, many important battles happened in the middle of the night, but she was unwilling to start streaming. This caused many of the salted fishes to wake up the next day to find that they had slept and the world had turned upside down. Jiang Pingji held the god-slaying sword tightly and closed her eyes slightly. She ignored the salted fishes' comments. Further ahead, the salted fishes saw many soldiers moving corpses and cleaning up the battlefield. The broken limbs and wreckage stimulated their eyes. Everywhere they looked was a scene of devastation. Corpses covered the place as far as their eyes could see. They died in different ways. Some of the corpses were still on fire. Even if the salted fishes were used to seeing storms and waves, they could not bear it at that moment. Some even turned their heads and vomited. Bai Ning rode behind her. His dry eyes were bloodshot. He glanced at the corpses and suddenly felt a little emotional. This battle, I don't know if it's a great victory or a Pyrrhic victory. It was obvious that the enemy had sacrificed more soldiers and horses. It could almost be considered a total annihilation, but they had lost 40,000 to 50,000 soldiers. Jiang Pingji looked indifferent and said, whether it's a great victory or a Pyrrhic victory, it's still a victory. Bai Ning smiled bitterly and said, my lord is right. I'm just feeling emotional. In this chaotic world, how many times will this scene repeat? His injuries were more serious. After emergency treatment by the military doctor, he was not in much danger, but he still needed to recuperate for a month or two. Although he could still ride the horse steadily, in fact he was forcing himself to hold on. He was not made of iron. He had been fighting for more than 24 hours without sleep and rest. He was also injured and lost blood. An ordinary person would not have been able to hold on. His lord could not be considered a person at all. How is Fengjing? Jiang Pingji asked. Bai Ning smiled and said, young people nowadays are not as good at enduring hardships as my generation. Fengjing was injured so badly that he was lying on the ground. The military doctor reported that the situation was not serious, but the injury was very serious. He needs to rest for 2 months. The wound needs to be taken care of. Otherwise it will fester. Jiang Pingji said, squatting in the camp for 2 months is better than losing his life on the battlefield. Bai Ning listened to her and felt a little uncomfortable. He and Qinggong were not fools. Some things they did not realize at the time, but after the war stopped and they thought about it, they could figure it out. They could not guess the details of the whole layout, but they knew the general direction. If they guessed correctly, the Lord and their 30,000 soldiers were the bait thrown out. Understanding this, Bai Ning did not know what to say. At the same time, he was not in a position to say anything. As the Lord, she had gambled her life. What was Bai Ning and the others? Not to mention that they had survived. Even if they lost their lives, it was a profitable trade to exchange 50,000 soldiers for 200,000 soldiers of the enemy. Bai Ning sighed secretly. Suddenly, he spat and scolded in his heart, this messy world. Chapter 1544. Seeing his lord return, Qiguan Rang still felt uneasy. Seeing Jiang Pingji alive and well, he heaved a sigh of relief. Qiguan Rang initially suggested Qinggong and Baining to lead the troops and inform them of the plan in private. However, his lord refused and insisted on leading the troops herself. When he asked for the reason, she remained silent. Qiguan Rang felt that it was both a blessing and a pain to have such a lord. It was a blessing to have such a tacit understanding with his lord, but he was always on the verge of death. It was painful to spread his wings. How's the battle situation? Jiang Pingji got off the horse's back and raised her hand to stroke White's mane. It rubbed against her hand intimately, panting heavily. White was a top-notch warhorse, but it wasn't made of iron. It had fought for so long with Jiang Pingji on its back and exhausted its strength. Qiguan Rang roughly explained the situation. The overall data was not too different from the battle report Jiang Pingji had received. Apart from a small group of defeated soldiers who fled, the rest were either dead or captured. The casualties were extremely heavy. Qiguan Rang said, "After this battle, the Nye family will never have a chance to rise again. The opportunity for our army to conquer Zhongzhou is right in front of us." Including the troops and horses lost while Nye Liang was still alive, the Nye family had lost 260,000 troops when they attacked Zhanjiang Pass. These troops were the Nye family's assets. Losing them all at once, the Nye family didn't even have their underpants left. There were many feudal lords in Zhongzhou, but only Nye Liang had the ability to fight against Jiang Pingji, who knew that Nye Liang would die early, followed by repeated defeats. In the last battle they lost their underpants. In other words, it was only a matter of time before they conquered Zhongzhou. At the thought of his lord extending her hand to the big cake that was Zhongzhou, Qiguan Rang trembled with excitement. Zhongzhou. Jiang Pingji raised her hand to rub her forehead, but her palm touched the dried blood clot. She froze for a moment and put her hand down without a trace. She said tiredly, "Let's put the matter of Zhongzhou aside for a while. Let the soldiers rest and conserve their energy." Qiguan Rang looked at her carefully and noticed that her eyes were bloodshot. Her eyes were also a little red. It seemed that she was really tired. "If that's the case, then we'll follow the Lord's wishes and take a break for now. Let Zhongzhou fight among itself for a while." The corners of Jiang Pingji's lips curled up reluctantly. "Oh yes, there's a captive. Does my lord want to see him?" Qiguan Rang asked. "Isn't my lord curious about why Zixiao isn't here?" Jiang Pingji said, "That captive is related to Zixiao? Could it be his eldest brother Wei Qiu?" Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "My lord is still as powerful as ever. You guessed correctly in one go. It is indeed Wei Qiu." Jiang Pingji tightened her grip on the reins and suddenly thought of something. She said coldly, "We'll see tomorrow. I'm really tired today." Qiguan Rang seemed to understand something. He sighed and said, "Yes." The two of them didn't say it clearly, but they understood each other's meaning. It was impossible for Jiang Pingji to recruit Wei Dan. It was not that she was not charming enough, but Wei Dan was bound to Nye Liang. He could only be destroyed and not transferred. She said that she did not want to see Wei Dan, but she wanted to set aside a night for Wei Ci and Wei Dan to have a good time together. What would happen tomorrow, whether Wei Yao lived or died, depended on what Wei Yao thought. Jiang Pingji hurriedly said a few words and turned off the live stream. She went to a nearby well to fetch a bucket of water. She looked indifferent when she found that the water in the well was also red. She suddenly lost the thought of washing up. Qiguan Rang was attentive. He sent a soldier to fetch a bucket of water from a place a mile or two away for her. Jiang Pingji did not ask someone to boil the water. She directly washed the bloodstains on her body with cold water. Her swollen mind became much clearer. "Yuaba, your eyes?" Jiang Pingji said coldly. "What?" "Yuaba, I originally thought that the sequelae of the awakening would not affect you much. It seems that I guessed wrong." Jiang Pingji used the water as a mirror to look at her eyes. She found that her eyes, which were originally light brown and slightly black, had a tinge of red. "It's okay. I'll just say that I'm jealous." Jiang Pingji was very open-minded. "Yuaba, remember to control your emotions. The ancestral genes of the Jiang family are very violent. You have to keep a clear mind." "I know. I don't need you to remind me again." Jiang Pingji used a dry towel to wipe her wet hair and suddenly asked a question. "I remember the old chief said that he would leave the Federation a long time ago. Why are you so clear about the Federation's plans?" "Yuaba, I've been the chief of the army for more than 100 years. I've seen more classified files than you." Jiang Pingji laughed. "Is the old chief in love?" "Yuaba, what? That's a big jump." Jiang Pingji said, "The 7th Army is the first vanguard. When necessary they will sacrifice a small part of their interests. That's what you taught me. But you said those words to me yesterday. I'm a little surprised. Is the old chief in love and becoming a little woman? His heart has softened?" "Yuaba, Tisk Jiang Xiaojiu has grown bolder. He even dares to tease me." "Yuaba, when in a position one has to take care of politics. When not in a position one doesn't take care of politics. It's normal for one's mentality to change. I'm being too harsh." Jiang Pingji was silent after reading it. That night she copied the heart-cleansing incantation. Wei Ci had taught her that. When she was upset, copying it would help calm her mind. At the same time, the atmosphere at the Wei brothers' side was very tense. Wei Xi could be said to have been brought up by Wei Dan. When he was young, Wei Dan was also the one who taught him step by step. In Wei Xi's heart, Wei Dan was like a brother and a father. He was more like a father than a father. In their previous lives, the two brothers did not have the opportunity to confront each other at the front lines. Now that it had been realized the situation was like this in the end. Why? Eldest brother refused to retreat at the front lines? Wei Dan was considered a core member of the Nye family. If they wanted to retreat, he would definitely be the target of everyone's protection. But in the end he was captured. Rather than saying that he was unlucky, it was better to say that Wei Dan had no intention of escaping back. If you were me, would you have the face to go back? Wei Dan asked him. Wei Xi was speechless. Wei Dan said, Zixiao has been smart and quick-witted since he was young. I don't think you're here to persuade him to surrender. He used a declarative sentence and his tone was firm. Wei Xi said, you and I haven't met for many years. We only met briefly in front of Guangshan's tomb. Why don't we take this opportunity to have a good reunion? He understood his eldest brother's temperament. It would be useless to persuade him. The other party's position and choice could not be changed with just a few words. Wei Dan said, sure. Most of the candles on the table were burnt. Wei Dan suddenly asked Wei Xi, do you still hate father? Wei Xi's childhood was extremely unfortunate because of his horoscope and the death of his birth mother. This was also partly due to his father's neglect. Wei Xi avoided the topic and said vaguely, those things are already in the past. Wei Dan said, although there are many sons in the family, there are few who can stand. In the future, I'll have to trouble you to take care of everything in the family. Wei Xi's hand paused and he said softly, I won't let outsiders bully them. I'll take good care of them. Of course, that was all. Chapter 1545. After all, they were blood brothers. Even though they had been separated for many years, Wei Yong still understood his younger brother very well. He could read between the lines. If that's the case, then I can rest assured. Wei Yong looked very haggard. His usually neatly groomed hair was now gray, and his face was full of exhaustion. Wei Xi could not help but say, even so, what I can do is limited. If I overstep my boundaries, I'm afraid it's beyond my power. Wei Yong understood what his brother was referring to and laughed in spite of himself. All these years you haven't received much kindness from the clan. It's truly not easy for you to still care about your family and be willing to help them. I'm not a thick-skinned person, so why would I ask you to do anything? What happened back then had indeed hurt Wei Xi too much. Because of his 8 characters, everyone pinned the crime of causing his birth mother's death on the newly born Wei Xi. Because of this, his father also developed a dislike for him. Wei Xi only slowly let go of this disgust when he was 11 or 12 years old, but it was too late by then. Due to his father's indifference and his relatives' cold treatment, Wei Xi's childhood could not be said to be easy. How much did everyone ignore him? When Wei Yong returned from his study trip, he found that his younger brother, who should have been enlightened for 2 years, could not even read a word. It was clear that no one remembered his enlightenment. He specifically went to look for his father and told him about this. Only then did his father realize in hindsight that he had hired a mediocre teacher for Wei Xi. Wei Dan couldn't bear to see his talented younger brother being trampled upon, so he had no choice but to do it himself. During the day he learned the basics from the teacher, and at night he would come back and give special attention. However, Wei Dan was also a young man with limited energy and talent. In the end, he sent his younger brother to the private school opened by Master Yuan Jing. Looking back at Wei Xi's childhood, delaying his enlightenment by 2 years was considered a small matter. The most serious time was when his life was threatened. Because the servants did not serve him well, Wei Xi caught a cold. He had a high fever for 2 days before it was discovered. Everyone thought that it was a normal fever, and the doctor they invited was only mediocre. When Wei Dan returned to the mansion, he found that his younger brother was about to go crazy from the fever. He hurriedly sent him to Xing Lin Divine Hands to save his life. Knowing these matters of the past, Wei Yong had no way of asking his younger brother to do anything for the clan. Moreover, Wei Xi was a man of his word. Since he had promised to take care of his family, he would definitely do it. Elder brother, Wei Xi looked at Wei Dan and could not speak for a long time, as if something was stuck in his throat. Wei Dan understood his younger brother, but how could Wei Xi not understand his elder brother? Whether it was his previous life or this life, Wei Xi's temperament had not changed much. In his previous life he had died of depression because of the early death of his best friend. In this life he was afraid. Thinking of this, Wuxia felt as if thousands of words were stuck in his throat. He felt powerless and could not even say the last sentence. Wei Yong was very open-minded. He said, "Are you trying to persuade me to drag out an ignoble existence?" He didn't even address himself as brother anymore. Under the candlelight, there was a hint of melancholy between his brows. Wuxi's hands, which were on his knees, clenched the hem of his clothes tightly. He said with difficulty, "Why don't you think about sister-in-law and nephews and nieces?" Although he didn't like using kinship to kidnap his elder brother, if he could keep him alive, even if he had to stay alive, Wei Yong's gaze was gentle as she sighed inwardly. "You should understand my choice." Wei Yong's expression did not change, but there was a hint of reluctance in his eyes. "For your sister-in-law, write a letter on behalf of me to let her go. Let her find a good man to marry again. In my situation, even if I survive, it will only be torture for her and she will be wasting her life. Other than the youngest one, the rest of my children can set up their own families so I don't have to worry too much." Wei Yong had 3 sons and 2 daughters. The youngest had already started to study. Wuxi's lips moved but he couldn't say a word. His elder brother had even planned all this. How could sister-in-law agree? The more he spoke, the softer his voice became. It sounded like he lacked confidence because Wuxia recalled what happened in his previous life. In his previous life, Wei Yong and sister-in-law were a young couple. Like most couples in this world, they were arranged by their parents and arranged by the words of a matchmaker. They didn't know each other before marriage and each performed their own duties after marriage. Rather than saying they were husband and wife, they were more like friends. A few years after Niel Yang's death, his elder brother's health deteriorated. After that, his elder brother passed away when he was less than 50. Sister-in-law was silent for 2 days before letting go. She seemed to have relieved some heavy responsibility in her speech. He caused a lot of harm. After that, the Wei family's power was weak and Wuxia had a say in the imperial court, so he thought of helping his elder brother's family. His elder brother had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Other than the eldest son who was slightly mediocre, the other 2 sons were not bad. If they were to gain experience, they would have a promising future. Wuxia was closer to his elder brother's family. During festivals, he would visit his sister-in-law and nephews who were widowed at home. While chatting, he heard that his sister-in-law had a good childhood sweetheart when she was still unmarried. However, that person passed away in the cold winter of the previous year. A few days after that, his sister-in-law also fell ill. What's there to hide? She's an old woman with 1 foot in the grave now. Why would she be afraid of people gossiping? Wuxia only found out about this when he visited the residence. His sister-in-law did not hide it. Not long after Wei Yong's death, his sister-in-law became widowed at home. Her childhood sweetheart also lost his wife for many years. The 2 of them got in touch again by chance. The other party seemed to still have feelings for her, but his sister-in-law felt that she was old and it was very embarrassing to marry again at such an age. Moreover, her grandchildren all went to the academy one by one. She had to think about her grandchildren's reputation. After a few rejections, her childhood sweetheart passed away after waiting for a few years. When his sister-in-law heard the news, she couldn't take it anymore and became depressed. She also fell ill. Wei Zixuan has long lost the will to live. It's better to say it clearly. Once they part, they'll both be happy. Why delay it for so many years? You've really done a lot of harm. Wuxia listened in silence and didn't criticize anything. This matter was indeed his elder brother's fault. His elder brother's situation in this life was worse than in his previous life. Even if he dragged out an ignoble existence this time with his temperament, he probably wouldn't live for long. He would die of depression. Wei Yong didn't know what his younger brother was thinking. He asked, "Are you married now?" Wuxia exclaimed. He didn't know why his elder brother's topic had jumped to this. "Not yet." Wei Yong asked him, "Is it because of yourself or something else? You should have a child to continue the family line." There was nothing that couldn't be said between brothers. Wuxia didn't want to beat around the bush, so he honestly told him part of it. "It's not because of myself. I do have someone I like. It's just that due to the situation I can't get married." Chapter 1546. You've had your own opinions since you were young, so I can't force you. But you should always pay attention to matters of the family. Wuxia understood what his elder brother meant. In both his previous and current lives, his elder brother had recommended to him to adopt his nephew. Wei Dan was very good to Wuxia. He had recommended many matchmaking sessions for him in his previous life. In the end, he had no choice but to let him adopt a son so that he would not have no one to rely on when he was old. I mentioned it to you once many years ago, but you didn't agree. Now that you're 30 years old, you can't delay it for a married woman. His youngest son had no one to take care of him, and Wei Ci was unwilling to marry and have no children because he liked married women. It was better to adopt his nephew and have the best of both worlds. Wei Ci was speechless. His elder brother's imagination was still so wild. I'll help you write the letter to release your wife. If you're willing to remarry, I'll take care of my nephew. If you're not willing to remarry, I'll send people to take care of them, Wei Ci said sincerely. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to adopt a son. Wei Ci had clearly rejected it, so Wei Dan couldn't continue selling the recommendation. They tacitly forgot the previous topic and talked about the future situation. Jiang Pingji won, and the Nie family suffered a great defeat. If nothing went wrong, the world would be hers. Wei Dan had studied Jiang Pingji in private so he could more or less speculate about her future ruling style and the way she would use people. As his elder brother, Wei Dan naturally wished his brother well. Wei Ci had chosen the right person, and he could not escape the honor of founding the country in the future. However, this didn't mean that Wei Ci's future career would be smooth sailing. There were many potential dangers. Wei Dan took advantage of the last night to teach his brother a lesson so that he wouldn't step on landmines. The most important part of the conversation was the struggle between the gentry and the commoners. Jiang Pingji obviously supported the poor, but she didn't intend to completely abandon the gentry. The two had different standpoints and their interests were entangled. It would definitely be a hidden danger in the future. If Wei Ci wanted peace, it was best not to get involved. Speaking of this, Wei Dan suddenly thought of something. Zixiao, it's best to have less contact with the Wei family in Bianzhou. It's even better if you cut off contact. Wei Ci was very surprised, as if he didn't expect this to come out of his elder brother's mouth. What? You're worried? Wei Ling said, I'm worried that you'll be sold and have to count the money for them. Wei Ci's hand paused and he almost dropped the teacup in his hand. He suppressed his panic and asked, Why do you say so? The Wei brothers belonged to the Langyue Wei family, which was a branch of the Wei family in Zhongzhao's Bianzhou. They had no choice but to move back to Zhongzhao because their family had fallen from grace. If he remembered correctly, his elder brother had a good relationship with the main branch in his previous life. Why did he warn him to be on guard in this life? Wei Yong said, the Nie and Wei families dominate Bian province's aristocratic families. With large families and large businesses, there's no lack of conflict. Although the Wei family's internal strife isn't as unbridled as the Nie family's, they're still unscrupulous. Who didn't have ambitions? The Wei family's ambition wasn't just to rule over Bian province. They couldn't allow a poor family to rise up and trample on their heads. It wasn't easy for you to get to where you are today. I'm worried that you'll be used. In the future, when Jiang Pingji really unified the 5 countries, the conflict between the gentry and the commoners would inevitably be brought to light. Wei Ci was considered a member of the aristocratic families and had the backing of the Wei family. If he didn't think of a way to protect himself, sooner or later he'd get into trouble. The best way was to sever ties with the Wei family and be a pure subject loyal only to the superior. He wouldn't participate in internal strife so that he wouldn't fall. The more Wei Ci listened, the more his hands trembled. In his previous life, he'd been closer to the Wei family. He'd worked hard to promote and train useful talents from the Wei family to be loyal to the imperial court. On one hand, they could be loyal to the imperial court and serve the emperor. On the other hand, they could save the declining Wei family. However, in the eyes of others, wouldn't this be forming a clique for personal gain? Some shrewd people in the imperial court knew Wei Ci's identity, such as Qiguan Rang and Feng Zhen. Wei Ci's action had indeed stepped on a landmine. It was no wonder that he'd been schemed against. Apart from that, Wei Ci lowered his eyelids. A conjecture that made him shiver all over appeared in his mind. Who was the villain who'd instigated Wei Tsong back then? Wei Ci thought it was the aristocracy led by the Nie family. Now that he thought about it, he seemed to have guessed wrong. It seemed that only the Wei family had the ability to extend their influence so far without attracting Wei Ci's attention and influence Wei Tsong little by little. If Wei Tsong ascended to the throne, wouldn't the Wei family stand to gain the most? Wei Tsong had been nurtured by Wei Ci as a scholar since he was young. He didn't have any political fighting skills. If he stepped on the crown prince, Jiang Yan, to ascend to the throne, could he be a good monarch? There were so many old officials in the imperial court who'd followed Her Majesty to conquer the world and had been on standby for a long time. How could he manipulate them? In order to sit firmly on the throne and balance the imperial court, Wei Tsong still had to rely on the Wei family in the end until he became a puppet emperor. If his ambition was greater, he could kill Wei Tsong and replace him, or even swap Wei Tsong's future heir. Without a sound, the world would have smoothly changed hands. However, these were only Wei Si's conjectures. The truth could no longer be verified. I'll keep elder brother's advice in mind. Wei Si's brows relaxed a little. He'd obviously taken Wei Dan's reminder to heart. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sky was already turning white. The morning sun slowly rose from the horizon. Wei Dan exhaled. He hadn't closed his eyes to rest for a long time. His eyes were dry and bloodshot. Please. The soldier said that Jiang Pingji summoned him. Wei Dan flicked the dust off his sleeves and said hoarsely, "Please lead the way." The person with the most complicated feelings was definitely Wei Si. As intelligent as he was, he naturally knew his elder brother's choice. He couldn't bear to see his elder brother walk the path of death with his own eyes, but he couldn't hide at the side and not even send him on his last journey. After struggling for a while, he appeared in the commander's tent with a pale face. He looked absent-minded and absent-minded. When Wei Dan saw Jiang Pingji, he didn't kneel or bow. He didn't even bow. He stood 2 feet away from her and looked straight into her eyes. Jiang Pingji didn't argue with him and went straight to the point. "Have you thought it through?" Wei Dan said, "Yes." Jiang Pingji asked again, "You're unwilling to submit? Do you know my temperament? What will happen if you're unwilling to submit?" "Of course I know. Those who submit will prosper, and those who resist will perish. It's nothing more than these 6 words. Wei Dan smiled calmly. He wasn't someone who was afraid of death. Of course, he wasn't afraid of Jiang Pingji's threat. Jiang Pingji still wanted to try and give him a promise. "If you submit, I definitely won't make things difficult for you." So it wasn't because of Wei Dan himself, but because of Wei Dan's identity, who asked him to be Zixiao's elder brother? There's no need to say more. At this point, Jiang Pingji naturally wouldn't stop Wei Dan. Unexpectedly, Wei Dan said, "I have a wish. I wonder if Lord Lanting is willing to fulfill it?" Jiang Pingji was thinking of giving Wei Dan a quick death and leaving his corpse intact. She didn't expect Wei Dan to bring up another wish. "Speak." Wei Dan said, "Can I die in your hands?" As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of several people present changed. Chapter 1547. Yu Ben Dang, what the F***ck? This person was really bad. If the host agreed to kill him, how would CI may live in the future? Tong Tong's girl, that's right. Although the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit, and Wei Yong is the loser and should stretch out his neck to be executed, it can't be like this, right? It didn't matter who killed it, but it couldn't be the host. She had spent 10 years to cook a frog. It was not easy. Mo Xingyo, if the streamer really kills Wei Yong with her own hands, even if Wei Yong is seeking death, Beauty CI will have a thorn in her heart in the future, right? Wei Dan's heart was too evil. Was he doing this unintentionally or on purpose? He was trying to force his own younger brother to death. Meow meow meow. This is definitely the cruelest way to break up a couple that I have ever seen in my life. A salted fish was a salted fish. He couldn't be serious for long, and the topic immediately went astray. Fenghua Wamanlu, except for those naive people who believe in love above all else, who wouldn't care that their lover has a blood feud with their loved ones? In online sadomasochistic novels, the male protagonist could kill the entire female protagonist's family to achieve an he ending. However, this was not reality after all. The salted fishes watched anxiously, each of them worried for Jiang Pingji and Wei Si. They had been following live broadcasts for so many years, so they naturally knew the temperament of these two. Neither of them could tolerate even a grain of sand in their eyes. Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Dan with a murderous look in her eyes. She pressed her left hand on the hilt of the god-slaying saber at her waist and exerted a little force on her knuckles. Her heart was in turmoil, but her face was as calm as ever. She asked Wei Yong, "Why did you make such a request?" Wei Yong said, "Rather than dying at the hands of an ordinary executioner, it's better to die at the hands of the Duke of Lanting. It's an honor." Jiang Pingji sneered, "Just because of this reason?" Wei asked him calmly, "What else? What do you think the reason is?" The atmosphere in the tent was unusually tense, filled with an awkward and suffocating atmosphere. Chiguan Rang and the others could not help but glance at the pale-faced Wei Si from the corner of their eyes. They were faintly worried. Many confidants had a tacit understanding that their lord and Wei Si were in cahoots with each other. If Wei Dan really died in the hands of the Lord, Wei Si sighed. Although he could understand it rationally, he would probably feel terrible emotionally. Jiang Pingji did not reply. Wei Si, who was kneeling upright, gripped the hem of his clothes tightly. His knuckles turned white from the force he exerted. I've heard that the Duke of Lanting is highly skilled in martial arts and is known as the world's most valiant general. Countless lives have been lost to the long saber in his hand. Wei Yong said, killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. It's just a matter of a knife. Is the Duke of Lanting being stingy about this? Or could it be that I'm so lowly that I'm not worthy to dirty your hands? The salted fish watched anxiously. They wished they could crawl into the screen and help Jiang Pingji kill Wei Ya. Since he was going to die anyway, what difference did it make who killed him? The King of Hell did not care about that. Could it be that those who died at the hands of the executioner were inferior, while those who died at the hands of Jiang Pingji were superior? Not even 5 million salted fish would believe that Wei Yong wasn't purposely looking for trouble. The atmosphere was stiff. Everyone in the tent had the illusion that every second felt like a year until Wei Si let out a cry of pain. He apologized to Jiang Pingji with a pale face. Jiang Pingji looked at the dark circles under his eyes and her heart softened a little. Zixiao, you've worked hard to plan for this battle. Go and rest first. Jiang Pingji's voice was very calm. Wei Si's lips were completely pale. When he got up, he swayed a little. Those who did not know would really think that he had been cultivating for too long and that his body could not take it. A young general raised his hand to support him and found that Wei Si's arm was trembling uncontrollably. My lord, I'm afraid the military advisor is very tired. Shall I bring him back to the tent to rest? Wei Si's face was very pale. His legs were weak and there was a possibility that he would collapse to the ground at any time. If no one supported him back, he was really afraid that he would fall halfway and something bad would happen to him. Jiang Pingji's left hand rested on the hilt of her knife, but her eyes looked at Wei Yong coldly. He looked back at her without the slightest fear. Go. Remember to call a military doctor with good medical skills to take a look at the military advisor. Who knows, he might have accidentally caught a cold. When the enthusiastic young general brought Wei Si out of the tent, Wei Yong's guess in his heart was confirmed. He felt a little bitter in his mouth. What was going on? How much enmity did the lord in front of him have with his brother? Why did she have to harm him for the rest of his life? Jiang Pingji pulled out the god-slaying knife with a swoosh and pressed the blade against Wei Yong's neck. She said coldly, he's gone. Do he have any last words? Wei Yong gritted his teeth and said, do you want to destroy him? He felt the most sorry for his younger brother. He thought that he had found a wise lord who was worthy of being entrusted to, but in the end, he was a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth. No wonder he refused to accept Wei Si's multiple attempts to go on blind dates, marry a wife and even have children. He never thought that the truth would be like this. Did the woman in front of him want to completely destroy Wei Si? If Jiang Pingji and Wei Si could get married, it would have been a long time ago. It had been delayed until now without any news. Most likely, she wanted Wei Si to stay hidden for the rest of his life. Whether Wei Si was a concubine or the two of them were in love with each other, public opinion would always be harsher on the weaker party. For example, Lord Longyang was very capable, but in the end, when people thought of him, they would say that he was a boy toy who served others. His talent, knowledge, and credit were all secondary. He could hide it now, but if it were to be exposed in the future, Wei Si would be nailed to the pillar of history and pointed at for thousands of years. Besides, was it so easy to be a man who slept beside a female duke? How many interests and entanglements were involved in it? Wei Si was going to be roasted on a bonfire. He could be schemed against and killed at any moment. Jiang Pingji said coldly, from the beginning to the end, I never wanted to destroy him, but I saw that you wanted to kill him. Those who were in the know understood, but those who were not in the know were confused and felt that it was awesome. Wei Yong's right hand grabbed the blade of the god-slaying saber. The sharp blade cut a long bloody wound on his palm. It was as if he could not feel the pain. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he smiled sinisterly. You can learn from those male emperors and have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, 3 husbands and 9 concubines, 27 wives, 81 wives. Wei Yong said in a hoarse voice, Duke Lanting is now considered a man who has the world under his control. As long as you want it, is there anything you can't get? Why couldn't she let Wei Si go? Even if Wei Yong did not say it out loud, Jiang Pingji still understood what he meant. What a dignified reason. Jiang Pingji sneered. This is the first time I've seen someone speak of their selfishness in such a touching manner. Wei Yong did have his brother's best interests in mind, but he also had the intention to annoy Jiang Pingji. Perhaps to him this was considered the best of both worlds? No matter what, Wei Ci had been tricked into a sinkhole by him. Jiang Pingji was never stingy with using the evilest thoughts to speculate about others. Wei Yong was the person she wanted to kill the most. Since Wei Ci was not around, Jiang Pingji could not be bothered to have a good attitude towards Wei Yong, so she spoke harshly. If you want to die, do it early. You can't even drink Meng Po's soup when it's hot. Chapter 1548. Wei Zixuan died a clean death, but it's troublesome for the Lord and Zixiao. Qiguan Rang felt a headache coming on. He had already accepted reality and was waiting for his young lord to be born. He didn't expect there to be unexpected complications. What are you worried about? Everything will work out when it comes to it. Old Master Sun Wen was not worried. Wenjing still doesn't understand the ways of a husband and wife. Qiguan Rang laughed. What does this have to do with the ways of a husband and wife? Old Master Sun Wen said solemnly, love can break through all restraints. Qiguan Rang was speechless. Why did this sound so familiar? After thinking about it, wasn't this a short story that Wei Ci had serialized before the war? According to Wei Ci's private disclosure, this sentence was added by his lord. It was incompatible with Wei Ci's writing style. Old Master Sun Wen looked at Qiguan Rang with an indescribable expression and coughed awkwardly. I collected it from Lan Lan not long ago. The story is quite interesting. I didn't expect Zixiao to have such a romantic heart. He thought the author was a widowed woman, but when he saw the signature, it was Layman Zaiki, Wei Ci's alias in the world of novels. Qiguan Rang said gloomily, the Lord cares about Zixiao very much. If there's a rift between the two of them because of Wei Zixuan's death, Old Master Sun Wen said, they won't have a good time. Spreading his hands, the old master had a resigned expression on his face. Qiguan Rang felt a knot in his heart. Old Master Sun Wen was the happiest in the entire military camp after the defeat of the Nye family. Those who didn't know would think he was going to have a second spring. While the two of them bickered, Jiang Pingji went to see Wei Ci to inform him of the outcome. Wei Yong had died after colliding with her knife. She sent someone to collect his body and asked Wei Ci if he wanted to collect Wei Yong's body. Wei Ci's eyes were red as if he had cried, but there were no tears on his face. Other than his low spirits, he was fine. If you want to blame me, blame me. I've killed so many people that I don't lack Wei Yong's life. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji was a model example of being single based on ability. Blame me. If there's a rift between us, I won't accept it. Wei Ci saw that his lord was sitting next to his bed. She looked as arrogant as usual, but in reality she looked a little nervous, which was rarely seen. Why would my lord think that Ci hates you? Wei Ci asked her, this is my elder brother's own choice. How can I indiscriminately implicate others? The outcome of the battle between the two armies was cruel. Just as Big Brother said, those who submit will prosper, and those who oppose will perish. If the person who lost today was the Lord, she would not have a good ending, and Ci would not be able to live in this world. There was no one to blame for this. If we really want to blame someone, we can only blame the world. Jiang Pingji said with a headache, the more reasonable you are, the more guilty I feel. However, Wei Ci said, why does my lord feel guilty? You can't have a guilty conscience if the captive is a blood relative of an official, right? Jiang Pingji was silent. She did not choose to sit upright. Instead, she crossed her legs. Her sitting posture was extremely inelegant in the eyes of others. I suddenly feel sorry for you. Wei Ci looked at her in surprise. He did not understand why his lord suddenly felt this way. Zixiao is only 30 years old in a few months, but his mentality is so open-minded and bright. He is not inferior to those wise men in their 50s or 60s. If you think about it, you will know that this is not the experience and understanding accumulated in this life, Jiang Pingji said in a low voice. It's most likely from my previous life. One only knows pain after falling. Many experiences can only be truly understood after experiencing them personally. Wei Ci suddenly said something completely unrelated. In my previous life, my teacher devoted himself to teaching and taught countless students. He could be considered to have students all over the world. During the chaos of the 5 kingdoms, other than Yumo, Wenbin, and Shaoyin, another 56 people became officials. There are 23 people who are qualified to be recorded in the new history by Master Cheng Cheng. Jiang Pingji scratched her head. What does this have to do with me? Wei Ci said, Most of these people are my classmates and good friends from when I was young. They are not like brothers but more like brothers. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She suddenly had an ominous premonition. Wei Ci continued, not only Yumo and the other two, the deaths of the other half are directly or indirectly related to His Majesty. Jiang Pingji was speechless. What? Wei Ci said helplessly, in the early days of the Jiang dynasty, the scholars from Langyi Academy had a deep conflict with His Majesty. Indeed, the Empress specifically caught and killed the students from Langyi Academy. How much hatred and resentment there was. Jiang Pingji asked, what about Wei Liao? Nie Liang died in the internal strife of the Nie family. My eldest brother was depressed for many years because of the death of his close friend. He died of illness before he was 50. Wei Ci lowered his head and said, his elder brother died in the hands of the Lord. It was his wish. I will take good care of the children he left behind. Jiang Pingji deliberated and said, I think, you have other things in your heart, indeed? Wei Ci did not hide it. He said, that matter is related to Fushou. Jiang Pingji knew Fushou. He was the son of the previous Wei Ci. His name was Wei Kong. Fushou took a detour and was used to force the abdication. My nephew's shadow is probably in this? Although I'm not sure, it's not far away. Wei Ci could not keep his son by his side at all times. Sometimes, when he could not take care of him, he would leave him at his brother's house and let his nephew and niece-in-law take care of him. Ever since the meteorite incident, Wei Ci had been much more cautious. He would even restrict Wei Tsong's interactions with the sons of the aristocrats. He was so strict, but Wei Tsong was still taken advantage of. Now that she thought about it carefully, the possibility of the aristocrats, led by the Wei family, colluding with his three nephews was very high. This was also the only way to not arouse Wei Ci's vigilance. Jiang Pingji said, isn't it all in the past? Wei Ci said with bloodshot eyes, in the end it's hard to calm down. His most beloved son was used by others. He brought outsiders to force the abdication in an aggressive manner. He almost forced his own sister to death and indirectly caused his own father's death. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that His Majesty was a step ahead of him. Otherwise he would not know what the situation would be like. He would most likely be disheartened with anger. According to Crown Prince Jiang Yan's character, even if he spared Wei Tsong's life, he would most likely not forgive him. Exiling Wei Tsong for 1,000 miles was already considered merciful. None of the family of four had a good ending. This was tragic enough. Jiang Pingji patted his shoulder and said, I'll lend you this golden and precious shoulder to lean on. However, Wei Ci said, this is an important military camp. Be careful with your words and actions. Wei Dan was naturally sad about Wei Ci's death, but it was not as serious as Qiguan Rang and the others imagined. He also did not have a rift with his lord. He carefully collected his eldest brother's corpse, changed it into clean shrouds, and placed it in a coffin to be sent back to Langya County. Although the Wei family of Langya had moved back to Bianzhou, the ancestral graves of the branch remained in place and had not been moved. Sending Wei Dan back to Langya County could be considered as a fallen leaf returning to its roots. Due to the recent death of his elder brother, Wei Ci had recently become plain and simple. He did not have much meat to begin with, and now he was even thinner. Chapter 1549. Did you get any news? In the Battle of Zhanjiang Pass, the Nie army had suffered a crushing defeat. They had lost nearly 200,000 soldiers and horses, and almost all the elites had died. Although tens of thousands of soldiers had successfully broken through, they had no order, no will to fight and no supplies. They were almost like headless flies flying around. They were very unlucky. After so much trouble, they met Jiang Pingji's triumphant troops on the way back and were beaten up again. After going through so many hardships, the troops were almost completely scattered. Fortunately, Fan Qin and a few other old officials were still alive and managed to gather the remaining soldiers. The Nie army was left with only the remnants of the soldiers. They didn't have enough supplies. In order to fill their stomachs, they had to start killing wounded war horses. After Fan Qin and the other old officials met, they carefully inquired about the whereabouts of Wei Yong and the others. There was still no news for 2 or 3 days. After this great defeat, a few old officials who were extremely unhappy with Wei Yong put all the blame on him, using this as an excuse to avoid their own responsibilities. Fan Qin ignored these voices. After all, it was not the time to quarrel and fight. He sent people out to inquire about Wei Yong's whereabouts. No matter what, he had to see him alive or dead. He couldn't disappear from the world. There was no news in the first few days. Fan Chen almost suspected that when Wei Yong was killed in the battle, the specific news came back. Report: the military counselor's whereabouts have been found, but the soldier's clothes were ragged and he looked dispirited. He didn't know how long it had been since he had a good rest. His eyes were covered with fine veins. Fan Chen couldn't help but grab the soldier's arm and ask, "But what? Tell me." He didn't finish his sentence. Did he want me to die of anxiety? The movement on Fan Chen's side also attracted the attention of the old officials who were resting nearby. They couldn't help but stretch their ears to eavesdrop. The soldier gritted his teeth and said with tears in his eyes, "The military counselor was captured, already met with misfortune." Fan Chen was so shocked that he took a step back. After waiting for the news for 2 days, he also guessed that Wei Yong might have been captured by the enemy, but he didn't expect that he would die. On second thought, this result was also reasonable. According to Wei Yong's temperament, it was already considered peaceful that he didn't die as an apology. How did he die? Fan Chen continued to ask. Himself or Lu Shi? The few people who were eavesdropping were also shocked, as if they hadn't expected such an outcome. They looked at each other and sighed inexplicably. Even though they didn't like Wei Dan, they had to admit that Wei Dan was another pillar for the Nye clan, which was currently in a precarious situation. If he died, the Nye family's future would be even more uncertain. Of course, the Nye family's future would be even more uncertain. The man spat and cursed, "You deserve to die." He really suspected that this person was a spy sent by Lu Shi. Ever since he, Wei Dan, took control of the military, did anything go well for our army? Now they went all out to attack Zhanjiang Pass, but they didn't get any advantages. Instead, the enemy found a chance to wipe them all out. If you say that this place wasn't sold out by Wei Yan, this old man will not believe a single word of it. The Nye army had already fallen apart. If there were any more conflicts, they might not even be able to return to Zhongzhou. Fan Chen clenched his fists in his sleeves. His nails left deep marks on his palms. He took a deep breath and pretended not to hear the old man's insults. He patiently asked the soldier, "I heard that Lu Shi tried to recruit the military counselor, but he refused," the soldier said with tears in his eyes. "The military counselor sought death and died under Lu Shi's sword." Fan Chen asked again, "Could it be, no one came forward to plead for the military counselor?" Everyone in the world knew that Wei Yong's brother was loyal to Jiang Pingji. The soldier shook his head. "I only heard this. I don't know the rest." Fan Chen sighed in his heart and asked, "Did Lu Shi send someone to deliver the military counselor's corpse?" No matter what, Wei Yong was dead. According to the customs of the two armies, the corpse should have been sent back. The soldier said, "The military counselor's corpse has been collected by his brother. He sent someone to bury it in his hometown." Only then did Fan Chen remember that Wei Yong was from the Wei family of Langia, a branch of the Wei family of Bianzhou. Because they had been separated for 200 or 300 years, their land was in Langia County. If Wei Ci helped to collect the corpse, Wei Yong's corpse would most likely be sent back to Langia County. Thinking of this, Fan Chen felt endless pressure rush toward him like a tide. His vision darkened and he almost fainted. Everyone hurriedly helped him awake. If even Fan Chen knelt, then the Nye army really had no one who could shoulder the burden. "What should we do now?" Fan Chen said, "I'm afraid the news of our defeat can't be hidden. It's better to gather the remaining troops and return to Bianzhou as soon as possible. The Lord's safety is more important. Where there's life, there's hope." Gathering the remaining troops could gather tens of thousands. Together with the troops in Ye Qing's hands, they might be able to stabilize the situation. Fortunately, the Lord Nye Liang had already dealt with the ambitious fellows who had attached themselves to the Nye family before he died. Otherwise, if the army was defeated and returned with a bunch of injured soldiers, they would probably be devoured until not even their bones were left. Lu Shi won't let go of this opportunity. The Nye family's assets had all been lost. At this moment, Zhongzhou was like a shelled and defenseless egg, allowing the enemy to do whatever they wanted. Fan Chen said, "Of course Lu Shi won't let go of this opportunity, but she won't be able to fight again in a short period of time." The Nye family had suffered heavy losses, but would Jiang Pingji feel better? Don't forget, she had divided her troops into 2 groups to resist Nye Liang's and Yang Tao's troops at the same time. Her troops were too scattered, and the pressure on her rations was great. If she didn't take some time to recuperate, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to hold on. Although the time was short, it was at least a chance to breathe. Fan Chen had never been a person who liked to sit and wait for death. He would always struggle to the last moment before he was willing to give up. His suggestion was naturally not wrong, but there were people who didn't want to agree. They were very afraid. The Nie family was invincible in Zhongzhou, but whenever they met Jiang Pingji they were met with a wall. Jiang Pingji had the protection of a miracle when she fought on the front lines. She had the protection of a miracle when she launched a sneak attack in the middle of the night. It was obvious that God was biased to the extreme. They were just a group of ordinary people. How could they compete with the Son of Heaven, who carried destiny? Nie Liang and Wei Dan had tried to challenge her, but what was the result? One died of illness, the other was killed. When Fan Qin heard these reasons he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. During the battle at Zhanjiang Pass, it could only be said that they were one step behind and fell into the enemy's trap. Their skills were inferior, so why did they have to push the blame to God? No matter how many voices of opposition there were, they still had to return to Zhongzhou. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have enough to slaughter the warhorses for food. Just as half of the remaining troops left, the news of the army's defeat reached Nie Qing's ears. What did you say? He could recognize every word of the person who came, but when put together he couldn't understand it. How could the Nie army? The person who came gave a concise account of the battle that day. Nie Qing's face grew paler and paler. Chapter 1550. Who did you say is gone? Nie Qing's slender shoulders trembled and his hands started to tremble. It was as if he was isolated from the world and could not hear anything clearly. Who did you say is gone? The gentle and polite Nie Qing seemed to have died at this moment, leaving behind an empty shell who had lost control of his emotions. He grabbed the messenger's clothes uncontrollably and lifted him up while breathing rapidly. He said shakily, "Tell me who died?" The messenger was also frightened by Nie Qing. He clamped his thighs together and resisted the urge to urinate. He said, "Military advisor Wei Yong, he was unlucky." Before the messenger could finish, Nie Qing threw him out like a madman. He really did not know how such a thin and weak body could have such great strength. The messenger did not fall seriously. He climbed up from the ground in a panic and resumed his apologetic posture, his body very low. "The deceased is gone. My lord, please restrain your grief." The official who was supporting Nie Qing saw his reaction and hurriedly comforted him. "Restrain your grief? How do you expect me to restrain my grief?" Nie Qing's eyes were already red. Crystal tears rolled down his cheeks several times but still fell. His expression was extremely fragile, as if a small blow could break him down. Nie Qing said in a choked sob, "Father is gone, that bastard Nie Yang is gone, and now even father-in-law has abandoned me. What did I do wrong to lose my closest relatives one after another in just a few months?" Nie Qing almost roared out these words. The veins on his forehead bulged and sweat and tears rolled down. "My lord did not do anything wrong. You did nothing wrong." The official saw Nie Qing paralyzed on the ground and went forward on his knees to comfort him. "If there is anything wrong, it can only be said that you were born at the wrong time. The Nie family's building has collapsed and the enemy is watching. If my lord continues to wallow in pain, how will you meet the previous master and the rest after 100 years? At this moment you should pull yourself together. After recuperating and accumulating strength, you can protect yourself." Nie Qing said hoarsely, "I know, give me some time to calm down." The official knew that Nie Qing was too young and could not withstand repeated blows. He should be given enough time to accept reality. After crying, Nie Qing then hoarsely asked where Wei Yong's corpse was. When Nie Qing heard that Wei Ci had sent Wei Yong's corpse to the clan grounds of Langya County for burial, he was silent for a long time. "Langya County. It's good that the fallen leaves have returned to their roots." On the second day, Nie Qing calmed down slightly and personally went to tell her mother-in-law the bad news. Madame Wei Yu was the standard of a landowning family's noblewoman. There was nothing wrong with her. Even when she heard the news of her husband's death, she could still hold back her tears. Nie Qing's expression was haggard as he said weakly, "Father-in-law's body was sent to the clan grounds of Langya County, but this son-in-law feels that perhaps Bian Province is the place he wants to rest the most. Mother-in-law, can you help me sort out some of father-in-law's belongings and set up a cenotaph to show my grief?" Naturally, Madame Wei would not refuse. She prepared the clothes, but Wei Yong's favorite objects, books and paintings were all in the study. Nie Qing was more familiar with them. Nie Qing pushed open the familiar study and saw the bright sunlight pouring in from the outside. The master had been gone for a long time, but the study room was cleaned by the servants. Every inch of the room was spotless. not even a speck of dust could be seen. Nie Qing's tears, which he had managed to stop with great difficulty, threatened to burst again. He was not a weak person. In just a few short months, 3 of his most important family members had passed away. Even a person made of iron would not be able to take it. Nie Liang was his respected father, and Wei Yong was his teacher and father-in-law, playing a fatherly role. No matter how bad that bastard Nie Yang was before the incident, Nie Qing had truly loved him as a younger brother. His feelings for him were real. Now, the 3 of them had died in the underworld before him. One could imagine the blow Nie Qing had suffered. He picked out a few of Wei Yong's favorite items. His gaze suddenly fell on the bookshelf in the study, and a passage appeared in his mind. Father-in-law. I'm your son-in-law, I guarantee it. I also know that there's a painting on the 3rd row of your bookshelf. Shut up. Strangely, he walked to the bookshelf and saw a few scrolls of paintings. Nie Qing opened one of the paintings. It depicted a green-robed youth reading from bamboo slips amidst rockery and flowers. He found the youth somewhat familiar. Upon closer inspection, there were faint traces of Wei Ci between his brows. Looking at the inscription, the youth in the painting was indeed Wei Ci. He opened another painting. This time it was not a single-person painting but a lively scene. A middle-aged man with elegant features was playing chess with his eldest son. A gentle and beautiful woman was holding a baby boy in her arms, watching tenderly. There were also 3 children of different ages, either sitting or standing, reading or playing. Nie Qing recognized at a glance that this was his father-in-law's family, and the beautiful woman was his mother-in-law. When the mountain ghost had been babbling nonsense, Nie Qing had thought that the paintings hidden on the bookshelf were pictures of avoiding fire or something incongruous. He looked through all the paintings and did not find anything similar. Among all the paintings, the one that left the deepest impression was the scene of Nie Liang and Wei Yong meeting for the first time. Nie Qing stood where he was for a long time, then sighed. I don't know if I should say it's a pity, regret, or something else. Whether it was the person who painted or the person in the painting, they were no longer in this world. Nie Qing chose 4 paintings to be buried in the cenotaph, leaving the rest for Madame Wei and the children as souvenirs. One was Madame Wei and the children, one was Wei Yong's parents and siblings, one was Nie Liang and one was Nie Qing. Madame Wei saw that he was so considerate and her expression was somewhat gratified. When the news of the defeat of the Nie army reached the borders of Zhongzhou, the pressure Nie Qing suffered could be imagined. But he did not collapse and instead gritted his teeth to support the situation. Reorganizing the troops and pacifying the people, he was so busy that he only slept for 2 to 4 hours a day at most. Even though Nie Liang had helped Nie Qing clean up those ambitious people when he was alive, he had not thought that the Nie army would be so thoroughly defeated. The Nie clan was weak, and the powers that had originally attached themselves to the Nie clan naturally had other ambitions. In order to pacify these people, Nie Qing had expended a great deal of energy. But he did not have enough troops in his hands and he did not have enough deterrence. There were more and more people who did not listen to him. In a few short days, Nie Qing had seen countless fickle faces. The people who had been fawning over him a few days ago in the blink of an eye, had climbed all over him, and used threats to force Nie Qing to hand over his authority. It was fine if it was outsiders, but the members of the Nie clan had also interfered. Their words expressed one meaning. Nie Liang and Wei Yong had wasted all of the Nie clan's wealth, and Nie Qing was young and could not support the situation. It was better to give authority to them, and let them turn the tide and save the Nie clan. When Nie Qing heard this, his heart turned cold and he could only sneer. What time was it? The Nie clan was at the juncture of life and death, and these people only wanted to fight for power and profit, and not unite to tide over the crisis together. Did they really think that he, Nie Qing, was weak and easy to bully? In troubled times, the fist was the hard truth. If one's fist was not as strong as others, then one could only obediently take a beating. Chapter 1551. A few days later, Fan Chen and the rest returned with the remaining soldiers. Disregarding his injuries, he immediately went to see Nie Qing to ask for forgiveness. Nie Qing was much thinner than before, the clothes he was wearing seemed to be empty. When the man stepped forward to help Fan Chen up, Fan Chen could feel how shriveled his hands were. Fan Chen's eyes were red. I am guilty and dare not get up. My lord has lost a lot of weight recently. May I be so bold as to ask my lord to take care of yourself? How could Nie Qing really ask Fan Chen to apologize? Based on the limited intelligence, Nie Qing carefully read the details of the battle at Zhanjiang Pass. He knew that the blame for the defeat could not be pushed to Fan Chen. Under Nye Qing's insistence, Fan Chen stood up shakily. He staggered and sat down on the mat. Nye Qing carefully asked about the details of the battle at Zhanjiang Pass. Fan Chen naturally knew more than the messenger. After listening to Fan Chen's objective narration, Nye Qing's already pale face became even uglier. We can't blame anyone for this defeat. We can only say that we were one step behind. Our plan failed and we were used instead. Nye Qing also knew that if they won the battle at Zhanjiang Pass, it was equivalent to forcefully opening the door to Dongqing. Jiang Pingji's other troops were held up by Yang Tao and could not return in time to help. If they made good use of the opportunity, they might have been able to take over Jiang Pingji's forces. What a pity. Fan Chen said in shame, I am still incompetent. If I could have killed Lu Shi at the front lines perhaps. He explained in detail how Jiang Pingji led the troops for a sneak attack but fell into a trap. Because Jiang Pingji appeared at the front lines, Fan Chen was certain that Jiang Pingji did not discover their plan and did not warn the guards. This was also the main reason why Fan Chen felt so guilty and blamed himself. If he had discovered something was wrong earlier, if the troops he led could have killed the leader of the bandits, the outcome would have been different. Nye Qing was silent after listening. After a while he said, using himself as bait, this Duke of Lanting is also a person who does not care about his life. With such boldness and insight, not to mention Nye Qing, even the heroes of the world would not dare to act so recklessly. However, when Nye Qing learned that Fan Chen led an ambush that was twice the number of enemies, his expression was unusually complicated. When Fan Chen said that Jiang Pingji alone was equivalent to half an army, Nye Qing suddenly felt a strong sense of powerlessness. The theory that Jiang Pingji was the chosen one became more and more popular. Even if Nye Qing didn't believe it before, he couldn't help but waver. His lips curled into a mocking smile as he sneered, how can mortals fight against the heavens? The theory of fate made people feel helpless. It was just like the northern Qin from hundreds of years ago. The ancestor of the royal family of the Baichen dynasty was just a small duke who commanded an army of 30 to 20,000 soldiers. His opponent was a giant who was about to conquer the world. There should have been no doubt about it. However, the meteorites and floods that fell from the sky had greatly damaged the vitality of the giant, and the ancestor of the Baichen dynasty had taken advantage of the situation. There was a limit to one's strength, and it was difficult to change the will of heaven. How could mortals fight against the heavens? My lord, why can't mortals fight against the heavens? Even the late master was not afraid of this when he was alive. Fan Chen's expression was a little sad and aggrieved. He said bluntly, if God had really appointed Lu Shi, why would he have stirred up this chaotic world and caused countless people to lose their lives? It would have been better to just throw the dragon throne in front of Lu Shi and let her ascend the throne. Wouldn't that have been faster and more convenient? What is fate? Whoever wins in the end will be the chosen one. The theory of fate can't be said accurately. Lu Shi went around saying that she was favored by the heavens. Didn't she want to use this to break down our fighting spirit and make us bow down to her? This sinner sincerely asks my lord to pull yourself together and plan for the future. When these words fell into Nye Qing's ears, it was as if they were enlightened and enlightened him, freeing him from his depressed mood. You're right. I definitely can't admit defeat so easily. If he admitted defeat to the enemy who indirectly killed his family, his soul would return to the underworld. How would he have the face to see his father and father-in-law? Seeing this situation, Fan Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he had pulled himself together, the situation would not improve because of this. The forces attached to the Nye family were restless, and the Nye family had the intention to split and become independent. Old Master Nye's prestige was useless. The few remaining elders also began to have thoughts that they should not have. Counting from Old Master Nye, Nye Qing was a fourth-generation great-grandson of the Nye family and did not have an advantage in terms of seniority. What made him most depressed was that Nye Qing's grandfather and Ye Liang's father were in this group. They tried to use blood relations and filial piety to force Nye Qing to hand over his power and troops. When Ye Liang was alive, he had cleared out a group of ambitious elders and peers, leaving out his biological father. No matter how ruthless Nye Liang was, he would not be able to act against his own father. He had only sent people to threaten and scare his father so that he would not have thoughts that he should not have. Nye Liang had calculated thoroughly. He had calculated that Nye Qing's troops were strong and that even his own grandfather would not dare to do anything to him. He had never expected that Nye Jun would lose so badly and that ambition would come back to life. Fortunately, Nye Qing's attitude was unyielding and the other did not succeed. Even so, the situation in Zhongzhou, which had finally calmed down with great difficulty, once again became chaotic. They were afraid that the small feudal lords of the Nye family would take advantage of the situation and divide the fat meat that the Nye family occupied. The Nye family wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to seize power from Nye Qing's hands. The forces that were attached to the Nye family also had their own ideas. For a moment, the situation was turbulent. Nye Qing felt that he was sitting on a small boat. Around him was a vast ocean. The wind roared, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The tempestuous waves wanted to tear him apart. Let's rest comfortably for a while and let Zhongzhou consume its own internal strife. Because of the chaos in Zhongzhou, Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to send hundreds of spies to gather information. Every once in a while she would receive fresh gossip. Just as Qiguan Rang and the others had analyzed, Zhongzhou was now in a mess. Even though they all knew that Jiang Pingji was the biggest threat and that they should form an alliance to resist her, only a few of them shouted slogans and did not put them into action. They are all a bunch of short-sighted mediocre people. Jiang Pingji knew that everyone was greedy and wanted nothing more than to monopolize all the benefits in the world. There were only a few people who were clear-headed and could resist the temptation of benefits. They only think of themselves before they die. Regardless of the past or present, it seemed that such people were the majority. Jiang Pingji remembered a certain mission in her previous life. She had to go to a foreign planet where war had broken out to retrieve a confidential document. The rebel army, the civilian army, and the official government army were in a three-way scuffle. They were hostile to each other. When Jiang Pingji went over, the civilian army gathered firepower to besiege a first-level city that the rebel army had occupied. When the city was breached, there were not many rebels who resisted. Most of the rebels went to make love, rape, kill, get drunk, brawl, and gamble. Even though the crisis was approaching, most mediocre people still cared about their own interests and did not learn to unite and fight to the death with the enemy. Jiang Pingji did not know if it was the influence of her awakening, but she found it increasingly difficult to calm down these days. Chapter 1552. Jiang Pingji rebuked Nye Jun. There were still countless tasks to be done after the war. She did not even sleep much. Naturally, she did not have the energy to care about the war situation in Zhangzhou. Besides, according to the news from the front line in Zhangzhou, the troops commanded by Fu Wang were not in danger for the time being. Of course, just because there was no danger now didn't mean that he was safe. Who knew if there would be an accident that would allow Yang Tao to completely turn things around? There was only one battle report from Zhangzhou every 3 to 4 days, and none of them were urgent. Thus, Feng Yi placed them at the bottom and would review them one by one when the Lord was not so busy. When he heard Jiang Pingji ask about Zhangzhou, he got up and searched for all the relevant information. Jiang Pingji glanced at the green panda emblem on the envelope and raised her eyebrows. To save time, Jiang Pingji divided the information into 5 levels according to the priority. The ones that were more common and didn't have any major events would be the green panda emblem. The intelligence level was the lowest. The next would be the yellow panda emblem, which was slightly more important but not life-threatening. The next level would be the orange panda emblem. From this level onwards, one would have to use a fast horse. The 4th level would be the scarlet panda emblem, and the highest level would be the pure black panda emblem. According to this classification, as long as she saw the color of the envelope, she would know what it was. Feng Yi had arranged the intelligence reports in chronological order. Jiang Pingji read them one by one. Ever since Feng Zhen and the others fell into Yan Lin's trap and fell into an ambush, they had become even more cautious. Yang Tao also knew his own weakness and did not dare to act rashly. For a moment, the two fell into a strange stalemate. This was also why the information after that time was the safest green emblem. Of course, a stalemate wasn't a good idea, especially when Yang Tao's side was in urgent need of rations and supplies. It would be disadvantageous for them if the battle dragged on for too long. Jiang Pingji read 7 or 8 letters and finally saw the secret letter with the yellow panda emblem. This secret report wasn't written by Fu Wang, nor was it written by someone else. It was written by Feng Zhen to Jiang Pingji. He seemed to be completely enraged by Yan Lin's scheme and had been secretly planning to take revenge. Feng Zhen and Yang Si, the 2 fellows in the top 3 of the vendetta list, conspired together and came up with all sorts of evil ideas. Feng Zhen carefully analyzed Yang Tao's current situation for Jiang Pingji. For example, Yang Tao did not have deep control over the aristocratic families in Zhangzhou. Feng Zhen did not intend to instigate the aristocratic families into rebellion, but he still wanted to alienate them from Yang Tao. For example, if Yang Tao was in dire need of rations, he could send people to spread the news to shake their morale and shake their morale. Feng Zhen planned to take a risk and suffer a defeat. Then he would leak the news that a large number of supplies were about to arrive at the front line in Zhangzhou to lure the enemy into taking the bait. However, Yanlin was still young and he was full of tricks. Perhaps he would not bite the bait just because of this one defeat. Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows and read the rest of the secret letters. Most of the secret letters were green or yellow, but there was one that was orange. Looking at the date, it seemed to have just arrived. Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. She opened the envelope and took out the letter with 2 fingers. She shook it open and read it carefully. After reading 10 lines at a glance, Jiang Pingji was almost furious. The anger that she had just suppressed flared up again. Everyone watched helplessly as their lord left another palm print on the bronze table that had suffered many setbacks. A loud noise reverberated in their ears. A few of the generals who had been absent-minded were shocked back to their senses. Qiguan Rang asked, "My lord, did something big happen in Zhangzhou?" Jiang Pingji said coldly, "Feng Zisher is tired of living. He's thinking of ways to meet the king of hell." Everyone was confused. They did not know what the wastrel Feng Zhen had done to make their lord so angry. "Take a look for yourselves." Jiang Pingji sneered. "He really thinks he has the power to hold the pass alone and hold back 10,000 men." The group of people carefully read the contents of the secret letter. They had a variety of expressions. Some were impressed by Feng Zhen's courage. He did not care about his life. He was courting death in a new way. Someone secretly mocked their lord. Only the officials are allowed to set fires, but the people are not allowed to light lamps. It was not a big deal for her to run to the front line and use herself as bait, but Feng Zhen was courting death. But then again, this was their lord's care. Qiguan Rang said, "Zisher's plan can be considered a good one. Besides, even if my lord wants to stop him, it's probably too late." Jiang Pingji's expression was one of exasperation. She could not help but curse the communication standards of this era. They walked when they went out and they communicated by shouting. Horizontal comments? Terrible. Jiang Pingji said, "It's fine if he wins, but if he loses he will definitely be punished for all his crimes." Feng Zhen still owed her many old debts. Qiguan Rang continued, "If he loses he will most likely report to the king of hell. My lord will not be able to find him even if you want to punish him for all his crimes." Feng Zhen was prepared to use himself as bait to lure the desperate Yang Tao. It would be great if he won, but if he lost he would lose his life. In the Battle of Zhanjiang Pass, the Nye army had been defeated. Jiang Pingji had also lost tens of thousands of troops and horses. She had no extra energy to support Fu Wang. Even if she did send reinforcements, how could they, a group of land soldiers, fight in a water battle? Qiguan Rang had made Jiang Pingji speechless twice. She could only sulk and recite Feng Zhen's name over and over in her heart. The culprit did not have the slightest self-awareness. This matter had to be explained from a long time ago. Feng Longzi had suffered a loss at Yanlin's hands. Even though he caught the Zhao family and punished them as a warning to others, the fence-sitters in Zhangzhou still sided with Yang Tao. Feng Zhen and the others saw this and were angry. They secretly recorded this group of scums who had flirted with each other in their notebooks. This alone was not enough. If they did not think of a way to salvage the situation, when they returned to see their lord, they would definitely be severely punished. Driven by the desire to survive of the officials and the pride of the strategists, Feng Zhen and Yang Si planned to return the favor and teach him a lesson. Not only did Yang Tao's side lack troops, but they also lacked supplies. The former could rely on recruitment or forceful expropriation to make up for the numbers, but the latter was not easy to handle. Without supplies, how could the soldiers fight against the enemy? Feng Zhen planned to use this to break the morale of Yang Tao's side. He had already made up a song and sent people to bribe beggars and refugees to spread it. Of course, he had seen the scene of Wei Ci manipulating public opinion and covering his lord's body with gold leaf. Naturally, he knew that spreading songs was the crudest method of public opinion. Therefore, Feng Zhen sent many people to spread false news. He grasped both sides and both sides were hard. For example, someone's neighbor's second eldest uncle's son was a centurion under Yang Tao's command and knew that the army's provisions were running low. Another example was someone's third eldest uncle's neighbor's son was a rice shop supplier and spread rumors to incite the people to rush to buy rice. Then he sent people to gossip in tea houses and taverns, or dressed up as merchants to spread false news. The advantage of the people's intellect was that they were easy to fool. They could easily deceive them with some news that was both true and false. The rumor mongers could open their mouths and refute them. First, they would spread the rumor among the people. When the rumor gained momentum and Yang Tao and the others discovered it, it would be too late to refute it. Chapter 1553. Feng Zhen's ability to control public opinion was not as good as Wei Xi's, but it was still far beyond the standard of this period. By the time Yang Tao and the others realized that something was wrong, the rumor had already spread like wildfire. The common people were in a state of panic, and the rice stores were all sold out. Taking advantage of this, the vendors doubled the already steadily rising price of the grain. "Bastard, why didn't you report this earlier?" Yang Tao rarely got angry. He was indeed open-minded, but he wasn't a coward who would remain silent after being bullied. Not only was he angry at Yang Xi and Feng Zhen for doing it secretly, but he was also angry at his subordinates for not doing anything. The people were making such a big fuss, but the relevant news had only just reached him. Public opinion had already formed, and it would be difficult to extinguish it now. The official who was scolded by Yang Tao felt wronged, but he was also innocent. The enemy is very cunning. Not only did they hire beggars and refugees to spread rumors, but they also sent people to spread rumors in tea houses, restaurants, and other places. They often used the name of relatives to trick the people into trusting them. Unfortunately, those ignorant people are easy to deceive. They easily believe a few words. The official didn't dare to exonerate himself, so he could only divert his anger and blame the enemy and the ignorant people. It wasn't spring plowing or autumn harvest. Many people were bored and had so much time that they could scratch lice. They could happily make up a small widow gossip for half a month, let alone the rumors that Feng Zhen had spread. By the time their people found out, the number of people who knew about the rumors was already very large. The rumors couldn't be controlled at all. Yang Tao's face was gloomy. He saw through the man's tricks, but he couldn't really put all the blame on him. Chen Su said, "My lord, the most important thing now is to find a way to stop people from talking. If the rumors spread further, not only will the people be anxious, but the soldiers will also be affected. In comparison, we can ignore the tricks of Feng Zhen and the others. As long as Feng Zhen and the others didn't send troops to attack, those provocations and tricks could be ignored." Yang Tao rubbed his brows and asked Chen Su, "How? If it was only a small group of people, it would be fine to catch them and punish them harshly, but not now." Yang Tao was not good at dealing with these kinds of things, so he usually let Yan Lin or Chen Su deal with them. "It's a pity that Xiaoyang isn't here." Chen Su sighed. Yan Lin was training and inspecting the armaments at the mouth of the river, so he probably didn't know about this yet. He continued, "I have an idea. I wonder if it will work." "Why don't you listen to it, my lord?" Yang Tao said, "Look at the situation now. If you have a solution, just say it." He was very dependent on Yan Lin, but that didn't mean that he would only focus on Yan Lin and ignore the other officials. He wouldn't let them down. Chen Su said, "Since the enemy has spread the rumor that our army is running low on supplies and fodder, why don't we show them that the rumor will collapse on its own?" Yang Tao froze for a moment, then said awkwardly, "Our army's provisions are indeed insufficient. How can we show it to outsiders?" Chen Su smiled and said, "To confuse the enemy, it's nothing more than a deceptive method. It's fine as long as it can calm people's hearts." They were indeed out of money and food, but it didn't stop them from faking it. Thus, on the second day, 1,000-strong grain transport team appeared on the street. Some of the wooden rice jars were carried on their shoulders, while others were piled on top of carts and pulled by people. The people were intrigued by the scene and craned their necks to get a closer look. Just then, a cook accidentally sprained his ankle, and the wooden rice jar on his shoulder fell to the ground. The opening was knocked open and the food inside spilled all over the ground. The centurion lashed his whip on the cook's body. The cook cried out in pain and rolled on the ground. "Hurry up and put away the food. When will we be able to store this batch of grain in the granary?" The cook knelt down and begged for mercy. He hurriedly put the scattered food back into the wooden bucket, resealed the opening and carried it back on his shoulder with the help of others. Whether it was the wooden rice jars on the cook's shoulders or the rice jars piled high on top of the carts, they were all heavy. This could be deduced just by looking at the heavy footsteps of the cook and the wheel marks on the cart. The people who were watching the scene were speechless. Didn't they say that the army was so poor that they couldn't even cook? Where did all this food come from? This batch of food must be at least 10,000 dong, right? Those rumors must have been deliberately spread by Lu Shi in an attempt to shake the army's morale. The people who said these things were all spies that Chen Su had arranged in advance. The surrounding people would only go along with them. After several batches of food were shipped, The rumor that Yang Tao was short of food was temporarily suppressed. When Feng Zhen heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. Yang Si laughed. I wonder who came up with this idea. It's really bold. Isn't he afraid of being exposed in front of everyone? If Feng Zhen and the others had received the news in time, they might have sent people over to cause a ruckus and knock over the wooden rice jars. They wanted to see if these jars full of rice were filled with real food. What a pity Yang Si and the others found out much too late. Yang Tao had already suppressed the rumors. Feng Zhen said, if Yang Tao is afraid of even this little risk, we don't have to fight with him, lest we lower our standards. No scheme was truly unsolvable or flawless. Even the best plan had a certain amount of risk. Qian Su could react in such a short time. Who could say that he didn't do a good job? Yang Si laughed. If there's a chance, we must recruit this person and make him collude with Zixiao. Wei Ci was good at manipulating public opinion, and Qian Su was also good at crisis management. With the two of them working together, they could even clear their name. Feng Zhen said sarcastically, if Yang Tao doesn't fall, do you still want to recruit people who are useful to him? Yang Si said, then we'll think of a way to make Yang Tao fall. Feng Zhen said, Yang Tao's weakness right now is the provisions, military supplies and horses. The latter are easy to deal with, but the former is not easy to deal with. Calculating the time, there was still some time before the autumn harvest. Feng Zhen wanted to make a big bet. Yang Si asked him, what are we betting on? Feng Zhen said, that Yang Tao's provisions won't last until the autumn harvest. Previously, when the aristocrats were throwing flirtatious glances at them, a few aristocrats who owned countless fertile fields revealed some key information. Yang Tao had sent people to borrow provisions from them, and the amount was quite large. These aristocrats were also shrewd. They knew that the so-called borrowing of provisions could not be returned. They didn't think highly of Yang Tao, so they simply refused. In order to win Feng Zhen's trust, they used this matter to belittle Yang Tao. Yang Si understood Feng Zhen's plan. You mean to lure Yang Tao's troops to intercept the provisions? Feng Zhen nodded. That's exactly what I mean. Yang Si said, there are many shrewd people under Yang Tao's banner. They may not be easily fooled. Chapter 1554. Really? Yang Si suddenly understood Feng Zhen's plan. He was secretly shocked at how daring he was. If the Lord finds out about this, who knows how she'll punish you? Aren't you afraid that she'll come after you? There's no need to worry when there are too many debts. I already have one on my back anyway, so I'm not afraid of another. Feng Zhen laughed shamelessly, looking completely fearless. If the Lord really wants to punish me, that'll be in the future. Maybe by then, I'll have made a great contribution and will be able to atone for my crimes. Yang Si couldn't help but roll his eyes and scold him with a smile. Outsiders call you a prodigal son. You really live up to that title. For joy, one should do it in time. How can one wait? Feng Zhen looked as if he didn't understand him and said casually, I do whatever I want. Why should I be burdened by a false reputation? A prodigal son is a prodigal son. What's wrong with being a prodigal son? Do you think I'll lose a piece of flesh just because someone else says a few words? Yang Si shook his head secretly. Had Feng Longzi been provoked silly by Yan Lin? Why didn't he even bother to cover up his embarrassment? What do you plan to do? Feng Zhen thought for a while and said, it's not difficult, but we still have to get General Fu's approval. Otherwise, he planned to let those fence-sitters get the real information about the rations. If that was the case, he had to discuss it with General Fu Wang. Otherwise, people who didn't know better would really think that Feng Zhen was a spy sent by Yang Tao. Fu Wang calmly listened to Feng Zhen's plan and rejected it expressionlessly. I don't agree. It's too risky. Feng Zhen said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Fu Wang sneered. I'm a wild wolf, not a worm. I won't do that. Whether it's the location of the granary or the route of transportation, it concerns the survival of our army. Of course, it can attract the enemy to bite the bait, but if something goes wrong, it will undoubtedly put our army in danger. Tricking the enemy's elites into coming to their deaths was Feng Zhen's most ideal assumption. But if something went wrong, they wouldn't be able to kill many enemies and instead give the enemy a chance to burn the granary. Wouldn't that be a huge loss? They had just suffered a defeat. If something went wrong with the granary again, would Feng Zhen be able to shoulder the blame alone? No matter how much the Lord protected Feng Zhen, a military punishment was inevitable. Fu Wang continued, has military advisor ever thought about this? Our army has just dealt with the Zhao family and exterminated them on the grounds that they were opportunists who betrayed us and presented us with a fake Great Universal Map. With this as an example, we should be on our guard against the landowning nobles who seek refuge with us. Where did they get their hands on something so confidential? Yang Tao's subordinates are quite shrewd. How could they not be able to see this? No matter what, Fu Wang would never agree. Although it was the duty of a strategist to come up with strategies, it did not mean that they were brainless boors. Fu Wang's duty was to command the entire army. He would listen to the military counselor's suggestions if he could, but he would reject them if he couldn't. Both sides would discuss and decide. Obviously this was the second case. Fu Wang rejected Feng Zhen's suggestion. If Feng Zhen still wanted to persist, then he could only try to convince Fu Wang one by one. Fu Wang's worries were not without reason. He had also pointed out Feng Zhen's flaws, so Feng Zhen could only choose to compromise. After a round of discussion, they finally reluctantly agreed. At this moment, Fu Wang acted like a hands-off boss and said, "You should personally write a secret letter to inform the Lord of this matter. I will not bear the responsibility for you." He was bold and careful, but he did not like to court death. One look and he knew that Feng Zhen's plan would be scolded by the Lord. Fu Wang did not want to bear the blame for Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen could only smile bitterly and write a letter. He wrote down every detail of the matter, sealed it and sent it to Jiang Pingji. Yang Si snickered and said, "Guess how the Lord will react when she sees it?" Fu Wang said sarcastically, "Most likely she will think that her ill-fated bronze table is the truth." Yang Si deliberately spoke loudly. "Aha, General Fu really understands the Lord. It's a pity that the table will suffer for Feng Longzi." Feng Zhen said, "Forget it. It's a blessing that the broken table can suffer for others." His lord's hand strength was terrifying. She could even leave a clear palm print on a specially made bronze table with one slap. If that slap had landed on him, he would definitely have died on the spot and would have ended up in a funeral. Feng Zhen had a clear understanding of his own strength. Fortunately, the Lord was far away at Zhanjiang Pass. Otherwise, Feng Longzi would not have dared to act so recklessly. After agreeing on the plan, the rest was naturally to devise a layout. Feng Zhen carefully selected and finally found a very suitable aristocratic family, the Qiu family of Zhangzhou. Yang Si took a break to check on Feng Zhen's progress and found that he had already chosen a scapegoat. What does the Qiu family have to say? Feng Zhen smiled wickedly. The Qiu family does not have a high status in Zhangzhou. They have an undeserved reputation, but they are not even as good as an ordinary poor family. The poor family was a nouveau riche and landowner with no official career. They had no power but they had money. Although the Qiu family was an aristocratic family, their most glorious period had long passed. Their current standard of living was not even comparable to that of a poor family. They barely survived by relying on the favors left by their ancestors. Yang Si took a closer look and did not find anything special about the Qiu family that was worthy of Feng Zhen's attention. Feng Zhen said, "You don't know this, but the current leader of the Qiu family has a mistress. Because he was afraid of the mother, he did not dare to bring her back to the family to raise her. In the end, he gave the baby girl to a rich family he was familiar with. Many years later, the daughter met a young ranger with the surname Yan. It was love at first sight, love at the second meeting, and love after 3 meetings. The two of them were a match made in heaven. Guess who this Yan guy is?" Yang Si guessed. Considering their age, that ranger with the surname Yan, is he Yan Lin's elder? Feng Zhen said, "He is Yan Lin's biological father." Yan Lin's ancestor had a good life, but his family was small and did not have a high status in Zhangzhou. Many aristocratic families who knew the truth scoffed at the fact that Yan Lin's father had married a mistress. Oh, I forgot to mention that the mistress's mother was a famous courtesan in Zhangzhou. Seeing as her best years were about to pass, she hurriedly redeemed herself and became someone's mistress. She put on a good show of keeping a mistress in a golden house and even gave birth to a daughter. Of course, this was old news. Other than a few old people, the young people today did not know about this gossip. Yang Si asked, "How do you know about this?" Feng Zhen laughed. "Of course, my former confidant told me. That courtesan's experience was envied by many prostitutes. Most prostitutes had a hard life. To them, if they could escape the mire while they were still young, they would at least have a home, even if they had to become someone's mistress. Their only daughter could marry into an aristocratic family as the daughter of a rich merchant. Who wouldn't be envious?" Yang Si asked, "You plan to use the Qiu family?" Chapter 1555. If that's the case, why would the head of the Chiu family be Yan Lin's biological grandfather? Yang Si had an indescribable expression on his face. If it weren't for Feng Zhen, who was a gossipy person, this relationship would probably never see the light of day again. Both the Chiu family and Yan Lin care about their reputation. The head of the Chiu family is willing to risk everything, but do you think Yan Lin would like the Chiu family? Feng Zhen sneered. Yan Lin is not stupid. How can he not know what kind of person the Chiu family is? If he accepts them as relatives, wouldn't his mother be the daughter of the Chiu family's concubine? Not only is she the daughter of a concubine, but she is also the daughter of a prostitute. Even if she has turned over a new leaf, her bloodline is still impure. If he doesn't want to admit it, she is still the daughter of a rich merchant. She is more upright than the previous one. Yang Si sneered. That's true. Feng Zhen glanced at Yang Si. Seeing that he was not affected by the words daughter of a prostitute, he was not worried anymore. Even the daughter of a rich merchant can't marry a noble family, right? Yang Si knew that decades ago, the social atmosphere was much harsher than in troubled times. There was a clear distinction between the gentry and the commoners, not to mention the daughter of a rich merchant. Even marrying an unfavored son of a concubine from a poor noble family would be like reaching heaven in one step, let alone marrying Yan Lin's father. So, Yan Lin's father didn't want the girl to be a concubine, so he found a way to hide her real identity. He even asked a good friend to take the girl in as his foster daughter. 2 years later, she got married as the foster daughter of an aristocratic family. Yang Si sighed. He is a man who is infatuated with love. For many men from noble families, if they fell in love with a girl from a poor family, they could take her as a concubine. Why would they worry about her? If the girl felt wronged, they could visit her more often and give her more gifts to please her. To marry a girl from a poor family, the wanderer Yan had put in a lot of effort. Feng Zhen said, deep love does not last long and extreme intelligence does not last long. Yan Lin's father had both, so he did not live long. A short sentence had washed away Yang Si's sorrowful feelings of spring and autumn. Did the Chiu family not react? Even if the Yan family status wasn't high, the Chiu family was still a weakling. It was better for the two families to work together than to fight alone. Feng Zhen laughed coldly. How could there be no reaction? Unfortunately for them, they were rejected by Yan Lin and his son. In fact, Madame Chiu also wanted to recognize Yan Lin as her grandson. Even if she couldn't, the two families could establish a friendly relationship and visit each other during the holidays. Who would have thought that Yan Lin's father would fall in love with his wife? He would never allow anyone to hurt her. If she recognized Chiu as her relative, wouldn't that mean that her mother was a prostitute who had been raised by the head of Chiu's family and couldn't see the light? Yang Si nodded as he listened. He was thoroughly enjoying this big melon of the aristocratic family's scandal. He didn't expect such a good man to exist in the world. He was even rarer than a national treasure. If he were Yan Lin's father, he wouldn't be able to do what he did when he was only 17 or 18 years old, even if he met a girl that he liked. It was precisely because they couldn't do it that they admired those who could. Feng Zhen said, the Chiu family has been in dire straits these past few years. They don't have much money left, but their children are running away one after another. The more they have children, the poorer they are, the more they have children. Not to mention the side branches, even the main branch is doing the same. The large family has become a huge burden that they can't get rid of. On the contrary, Yan Lin has become Duke Yang Tao's most trusted confidant and is often entrusted with important tasks. Madame Chiu is jealous and afraid. Yang Si was confused. Afraid? Feng Zhen said, afraid of silencing them. They are afraid that every day that Yan Lin oppresses them, they will never have a chance to make a name for themselves. Yang Si almost laughed at Madame Chiu's words. He opened the golden fan in his hand and covered his gloating smile. I'm afraid that Yan Lin doesn't care about them at all, let alone killing them. They have too many tricks up their sleeves. Yang Si knew himself very well. He knew that he and Yan Lin were two different kinds of people. The former was the kind who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He didn't care if his enemy was a noble or a commoner. If they offended him, they would have to pay the price. The latter was different. It wasn't right to say that Yan Lin didn't care about anything, but he really didn't care about the barking of an ant. What was the difference between Madame Chiu and an ant in front of Yan Lin? There was a huge difference in their status. If nothing went wrong, they would never meet again. How could Madame Chiu be afraid of Yan Lin oppressing them? Feng Zhen laughed. No matter what, despicable people like Madame Chiu are the puppets we need. is the best way to kill people with a borrowed knife. Yang Si closed the golden fan and played with the jade pendant. Take it easy. Don't capsize. He rowed his boat not by oars but by waves. But a big wave could capsize. Didn't Feng Zhen capsize once before? On the other side, the unlucky Madame Chiu, who was targeted by Feng Zhen, was also uneasy. Yan Lin made Feng Zhen suffer a great loss. Then Feng Zhen spread rumors, but it was easily resolved. In the eyes of outsiders, the whole situation was in Yang Tao's favor. This news was like a shot in the arm for Yang Tao's fans, but it was a bolt from the blue for the fence-sitters who couldn't help but join the enemy. These days, Feng Zhen had been deliberately avoiding the public eye. They were even more anxious. At this time, Qiu Shi and the others had finally gotten a response from the countless favors they had gone through. The best way for gentry to keep their status and reputation was to become an official. With power, money and influence were not far away. Seeing that Yang Tao was dying, they hurriedly joined the enemy. They tried their best to find a way and recommended themselves to be put in an important position. However, Jiang Pingji's side was harder to deal with than Yang Tao's. There had been no news about her. Now that there was finally news, it should have been a good thing to be happy about, but they couldn't smile. First, the job they got was to go to the front line. It was too dangerous. They could lose their lives if they weren't careful. Second, the status of the job was too low. There was limited room for promotion. It was basically a job to send people away. Third, the scales of victory were tilted in Yang Tao's favor. They were also shaken. They questioned the correctness of their previous action of climbing the wall. They didn't know that the kind of lord was like the kind of minister. Feng Zhen was also an old hand at fishing. In order to further intensify Madame Chiu's determination to defect, he secretly played many small tricks. Father, I thought Lu Shi was destined to fail. The son of the leader of the Chiu family was about to go crazy from being tortured by his superiors. He felt humiliated when he thought of the face of a villain who was intoxicated by success. Old Master Chiu asked, "Did you suffer again today?" His son felt wronged. For the past few days, his superiors had made things difficult for him, picked on him and humiliated him. He was about to collapse. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.